be introducing our facilitator again, Dr. Nelson Dzade. Yeah, Dr. Nelson Dzade is an assistant professor of energy and mineral engineering in the John and Willie Leon Family Department of Energy and Mineral Engineering at the Pennsylvania State University, USA. He's also an affiliate to the Penn State Materials Research Institute, the Institute of Energy and Environment, Institute of Computational and Data Sciences, and the Alliance for Education, Science, Engineering, and Design with Africa. He's also a visiting assistant professor at the University of Science and Technology, where he teaches and mentors graduate students. He has also participated in education and capacity initiative in several universities and research institutions in sub-Saharan Africa, including the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Ghana, University of Botswana, and University of Namibia. Dr. Dzade leads the Materials and Mineral Theory Group, which specializes in the development and application of advanced theoretical methods to unravel structure, property, performance relationships in solid-state materials. His research works has been published extensively in several high-impact scientific journals and communicated as invited talks at several high-profile international conferences and symposiums. So Dr. Dzade received his BSc in Applied Mathematics Statistics major from the University of Development Studies, Ghana, MSc in Material Science from the University of Science and Technology, African University of Science and Technology, Nigeria, and a postgraduate diploma in Material Science from the Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research, India. He received his PhD in computational material chemistry from the Department of Chemistry, University College London, United Kingdom. He was subsequently a postdoctoral researcher at the Utrecht University in the Netherlands. And in 2018, he received the UK prestigious Energy and Physical Sciences Research Council Innovation Fellowship, which was hosted at the School of Chemistry, Cardiff University. He has won a number of other competitive academic and industrial scholarship and prizes, including an overseas research scholarship from the University College of London, a British Petroleum Research Fellowship, a World Bank Scholarship, and a Government of Indian Scholarship, EPSRC Innovation Research Fellowship, and the Duo Indian Professor Fellowship Award, which enables him to establish high-profile collaborations with leading Indian scientists. So it's an honor to welcome Dr. Nelson Dzade to this program, and we are so happy to have you train us on how to do literature review, and also be glad to learn the basics of research from you. We know you have a very wide understanding about this concept, and we believe that you would help us learn and be better in as a scientist, as a researcher. Thank you so much. I think you can share your screen now. I'll stop sharing now. Then, can you share your screen? Yeah. Okay. So if you have any question, please, you can take advantage of the chat box to ask your questions. And then, yeah, the meeting is recorded, and we'll be sharing the recording on the YouTube channel. So I'll drop the link of the YouTube channel so you can listen to the recording later and share with your friends as well. Thank you. You're muted, sir. Okay. out. Okay. Yeah. Okay, you can unmute yourself now.
Okay, good. Great. So what a pleasure. It's always a great honor to catch up with like-minded people who are searching for the same dream, the same thing we are all looking for. It's like gold we are all going to be searching for. And that means that we are fellows in the same boat. So first of all, I would just thank Fumi for a wonderful job that she's done so far with regards to genius in Africa. I like it that you said every child, everyone has some genius in them. It's just yet to be untapped, to be tapped, and then released to the forefront for everyone to see. So today, yeah, we are all geniuses. We are all genius, wherever you are coming from, whether in Africa based or you are in the diaspora, wherever you are. And we want to celebrate everyone. We want to say thanks to everyone for the little way you are contributing wherever you find yourself. That is your territory. So continue to dominate your territory, continue to do great things in little ways, in medium ways, and in large ways. But altogether, everything will fall in place. So today's training, it's a very important one, and it is something that everyone, as long as you're in academia or you're in industry and you do research and development in some form, you got to have a grasp of. Generally, scientific writing or any form of writing is always very challenging. It's not just for students. It's not just for whether you are a bachelor students, a master students, a PhD students, or a postdoc. It is also peculiar to even the established professionals. Whether you are a professor or not, these are all things that we don't take lightly. Everybody needs to invest in themselves to be the best version in that area. So today, as in partnership with the Genius in Africa, we want to dive into a little bit of this kind of writings. So I basically call it as a training, but call it writing a literature review. We're going to look more into the introduction, which will cover a lot of backgrounds, why we need to know why we are doing what we are doing. And then we'll follow up with some step-by-step guide, how this process actually works. We will look at some few examples here and there. Because of the large number, initially I was thinking of having some dividing into groups and stuff like that. We can have a lot of discussions among ourselves, but due to the large number of participants, the grouping will be very hard to really do. So as I go along the line, there will be pauses, there will be times to welcome. We should make it very interactive. If I pose any question, we are learning from each other, and that's the key thing. Everybody has a genius in them. There is a way. And literature review, as we will see, it may differ a little bit from discipline to discipline, and I'm sure people are from different and diverse backgrounds in sciences, in psychology, in economics, in statistics, in biology, in engineering. So the way we approach them individually from different disciplines may differ, but we want to learn from each other as well, how things are done within your field of study. But there is a thread that links all of us together. There's a commonality. Those are the ones that I will be highlighting today, something that binds all of, whether you are from this discipline or the other discipline. So those are things that we want to dive into today. So let me see, this thing is covering a couple of things. Okay. So in the form of just sharing what we're going to be looking at, just some general objectives of the training. What do we always have to have some expectation. What do we want to achieve at the end of the day? So we're looking forward that as we go through this together, the key thing is always when you know why you do something, you try to do it well. So the first thing, we want to make sure that we understand the purpose of why we are doing a literature review. Why is this whole process such an important process to really embark upon as to whether you are, whatever you are doing it for? If you know the importance of it and you know what is the purpose for it, that informs you to also be able to dive deeper into it. You want to distinguish between different types of literature review that are out there. What kind of literature are you doing? If you know the type and what is expected of it, then you can do it exceedingly well. You want to become very conversant with some of the key steps that you want to follow, things that you set aside for yourself to guide you on day-to-day as you do literature review. We call them, we vary from one to other, but they're going to be common trend. We're looking at steps that we want to follow ourselves through. The next thing will be that we want to learn how to structure our literature review in order to make it stand out. We want to make it look really good. And those are things that we are all trying to look at. So generally, we will wrap up and look at some examples and look at what may constitute something we call a bad literature review, a better literature review, or maybe a best literature review. And then we will share a lot of expectations with each other. But as we go along the line, yeah, we want to make this very catching up. So at some point, if I ask questions, maybe Fumi can allow people to unmute themselves and they can contribute if you have some questions, because as I'm sharing my screen, I won't be able to see chats that are going on. So Fumi can monitor the chats. If there are some questions coming up in the chats, you can draw my attention because I can hear you, and then you can read them out, and I will try to address them, or somebody within the audience can also answer those questions based on whatever field that question is coming from. So that's going to be kind of a snapshot of how we want to dive into today's itinerary.
Okay, but if you have a question, you can just use the reaction button to raise your hand.
Exactly. Yeah. So that Fumi can see, and if there's a chat as well, Fumi will see it, and then she will prompt me as and when some of those questions come. Or sometime when I pause myself, those are time for you to ask the questions as well.
Okay.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, we're going to set the ball rolling and begin to dive into the process and unfold some of these, unpack them one after the other. So today's form, I just thought that I would start off to give you some relevant information and data sources where some of these things I will be talking about today were kind of selected and picked from here and there. But these materials, so first of all, these slides, I will be making them available to Fumi as well. She will try to distribute it to our participants. I'll make it freely available, so you are free to have it and keep it in your archives and utilize them whenever needed. Yeah. So, but these are some very resourceful materials in terms of books that if you ever get hold of them, they can expatiate on some of the things we'll be covering today. So I think Fumi is already highlighting one of them. Yeah. So that's the second one. I think they're how to write a publish a scientific paper. So there are very good resources out there that you want to see if you can get hold of them, and they're very useful. So literature reviews, key steps, how to write scientific publications, helping doctoral students write, pedagogical for supervision. These are all very, very good resources that you want to. And everything you do, you want to see them as story you're telling. I always say that scientific writing or any form of writing is a story, and how catchy your story is what is going to stay with people. So how you synchronize things, how you bring things together, how you look through and connect the dots. It's a story. So you want to make sure that that book on telling a story, writing a literature review, I like it because it calls it storytelling. And typically that is a narrative I have adapted in my life when I'm writing any form of scientific writing, whether a paper or anything. You want to see that it's a story you want to tell. And if you don't gather the right ingredients, your story isn't going to be the best story. So that's something you want to keep in mind. And there can be different types of writing for different sciences and different disciplines. Like if you were in a health sciences literature review made easy, that may be a very resourceful material for you if you happen to be in that type of territory. So different materials are out there that you can lay hold of after this, and if you want to learn more and expand your horizon in the area of literature review. So yeah, there are some other relevant materials that I've listed here. You will be having the slides, so you can search them out later. Some of them you might find even in PDF formats that you can keep in your archives and fall on them once in a while whenever you need to cross-check something and be sure that you are in control of it. So very important that we grasp all these tools. I call them tools. They are weapons that we need to all have in our arsenals. Whenever we need them, we can fall on them. So that brings me to kicking off the start. So the key thing, I just wanted to say this, it's very categorical that every time you write a literature review, what is it at all? What actually are we interested? What are we talking about here? Why is it called literature review? Yeah, we all know what a literature is, but the thing is you are reviewing. So I highlighted the part I pulled there that it's an objective. And it got to be objective. So there's no kind of taking side or being biased or being anything. You want to be objective. If you see something that is contradictory, you still want to point it out. If there is some debate, there's argument, whatever it is, you are objective. So you don't go into literature review with just completely biased mindset, because then what you end up doing is whatever you're going to be looking for will be biased towards what you're looking for. But you're out there to really review the literature, what people have already done, whether good or bad, whether contradictory, whether it's debates, whatever it is, you want to be objective. As much as possible, you also want to be concise, you want to condense your materials, you want to make sure that the scholarly you're summarizing is more concise so that the reader who is reading your literature review can really follow you. It's a critical summary as well. Sometimes we got to see that it can be critical because you have to put your opinion also in the literature review. You are not just copying and pasting what the person has said. You are actually also contributing to the discussion. So sometimes you can sound critical because you now say that, oh, there is a statement made here, but that statement does not hold water. So therefore, you will sound a little bit critical that this person has said it. However, so you contradict it. So sometimes it can sound as if it's a bit critical, but you do that from a very objective point of view and from a very informed point of view, not just because you just bias, you want to just be critical. Yeah. So the key thing is of every public literature, and that is relevant to a topic of interest. That is the key thing. Every literature review has, you cannot just do an infinite literature review. It has to always be narrowed down to a chosen topic. What exactly do you want to look at? And that is why most often it's the key thing is the available literature in your chosen topic of area. And that is why I say that because we all come from different disciplines, and I see people from all kinds of countries, from all kinds of discipline, your topics you're going to be choosing is going to be completely different. Somebody may be interested in crop production. Somebody may be interested in a material. Somebody may be interested in health and obesity, or in human life and high blood pressure. Whatever you are looking for, your chosen topic has to be narrowed down. So literature review, if you just choose it vaguely, you have tons and tons of things you are going to be seeing that you don't even know how to narrow it down to the specific. So a chosen topic is always very important that we get that very well. Now, so it's basically you're surveying the scholarly sources to provide an overview of the current search and every available data and knowledge that is out there. Once you are doing something of this process, you are being very objective, you're being very concise, you've been critical, but I just explained to you already, it's not just being critical for being critical sake, but you are doing that from a very objective point of view, from an intellectual point of view, from a very well-informed position. So that is when you can spot some of these contradictions and debates and contradictory results, and you want to point them out. It's not time to just side with only the ones that agree with you or that agree with the hypothesis that you have initially formed for yourself. So that becomes very important, that we know that is exactly what we are doing. And once we understand that concept, then the key thing then is, what does it really mean to review the literature? What does it really mean? So you know that's an objective thing you're doing, but to review the literature will mean to be able to identify some few things. So one, what you want to identify what has been established. That's the key thing. So as you start your work, you're doing a literature means there's a pool of information out there relating to the topic that is of interest to you. So the key thing is that you really have to decipher through those materials and identify what are the key established things in the area, the topic that is of interest to me. What are the established facts? What are the things that are clearly established? Number two, what are some of the things that are discredited? Because there will be a lot of literature out there which are equally discredited. Some people will publish some papers only for you to find out that 10 years down the line, everything in that paper doesn't hold water. So it can be discredited as well. Your goal is to be able to identify those as well. So as you're talking about what is being established, you equally want a good literature review will always point out some of the things that are discrepancies. You don't just do literature review and only go for only the good things. You want to put things into perspective. Sometimes maybe it's discredited, not necessarily because the science or whatever is done is wrong. It's just as at the time, the techniques or the methodology that was available as at that time would not allow them to achieve the kind of result that is achievable in the current time. But then as you discredit that, you want to also give them the due credit that during that time, if they never have atomic microscopy, which could observe a material in a new dimension, but they were able to do something like that, you want to point out, at least still celebrate if it's in the 80s, 60s, even though the trend has changed, the results have changed, you want to still point it out. As at that time, that is what is achievable. So, and then the next thing is acceptable in the field. What are the key accepted things in the field? Sometimes you go as if it's established as well. So your goal as you're doing a literature review, your goal is to be able to dish out all these things so that when you write your literature review, you really want to point out these key things: established, discredited, accepted facts within the subject area that is of interest to you. So areas of controversy, like I told you already, there are going to be controversies. Some scientists will agree with scientists, some researchers will agree with some researchers. There will be always controversies among us. But sometimes these are called healthy controversies. And you want to point them out. If a child has done this and point out that this is it, however, this person has found out this, you would want to point out, and they will all come from the point of view from which the conflict is coming from. So every area of controversy that's what a good literature review does. It puts things into perspective, it connects the dots, and where there's contradiction, it points them out as well. So those are all things you want to read. So as you read your expansive literature, available information to you, you want to be mapping out, oh, does this paper agree with this one? Is there agreement between this one and this? Or there's disagreement between this one and this one? So you start grouping them to know, oh, these ones have all these facts support this one, this one, this one. So this can be within the same bracket. However, all these other results also contradict this and that and that. So you want to start to match up, where is the conflict coming from? What is leading to the controversy? And you want to make sure that you point out those things and highlight the sources of the controversy. So problems and issues that remain unresolved. As you do literature review, this is a very, very important part that when I do any literature review, these are the part I really look out for. What are the gaps? What are the unresolved things there? Because that is the area you are going to be trying to venture into. Those are areas that gives you open questions that are left unsolved, that are left unresolved, so that you are creating a niche area for yourself, a territory that you feel when you begin to plow, somebody will not tell you, hey, that area has been plowed already. Why are you plowing it again? So you want to make sure that you identify the key issues that are still relating to your topic area of chosen, any issues that are still there, that still warrant further investigation, that still warrant further attention. And anything that is unresolved, you want to point them out. They may also quickly then align with a research question that you are going to pose, but already you will have pointed out that these are the gaps, these are the issues, these are still that are missing there, and therefore warrant further investigation. You also want to point out the emerging trends and the new approaches. Like I told you, science is an evolving thing. Every discipline is evolving. And that is why what is happening in the 60s can never be the same as what is happening in 2022. It's an evolving field, and new techniques are coming, new approaches are coming. What are the new trends? What is the results in the 80s compared to a result that is obtained in 2022 based on sophistication of characterization, new approaches, new advancements in every discipline? You want to point out the emerging trend. What are the things that are changing from, as you do maybe a chronological kind of review, looking at things from historical point of view? How have things evolved and are changing based on available new techniques that are out there for you? So how your research extends. So as you do all of this, you quickly will see that you will find the niche areas to extend the current research, and it gives a justification to it. So how your research will extend, build upon, or depart from previous research. That's the key thing you are trying to do. So we're going to see very soon what kinds of literature reviews are out there, but these are generally when we say you are doing a literature review, these are things your eyes are open to, you are looking for them. It's like you're searching. You want to establish, you want to find out what is established, what is discredited, what are the controversies, what are the gaps, what are the new emerging trends. Okay, when I know all of these things, then I will want to extend it. I will want to now choose one of those issues and begin to address in a new research. So the art of reviewing basically involves evaluating individual sources as well as synthesizing these sources in order to develop your own research project. And we will come back to look at synthesizing and evaluating. You're not just reading the literature review to just cite, oh, this person, 1,000 people, X and Y and Z and D have done this. That's not where you want to end. You want to synthesize. Synthesize simply means as you read different sources, you begin to connect the dots. You begin to point out how are they linked together? What are the things that we need to point out to each other? So the key words I'll always use is evaluating and synthesizing. They will occur several times as we go through this training process, but the synthesizing, I'll have a separate slide on it, which we will dive a little bit into it, so that you know that you are not just listing the literature or just summarizing the literature of what somebody has done, but you actually want to synthesize them. Synthesize, you want to condense them and connect the dots. How are they connected? Linking them, and that becomes a very formal way of doing a very decent literature review. So as we said already, they're intertwined again, they are linked to each other, the purpose. I can see, who can see this Scrum trees recording? Okay. So the key thing is the purpose as well. A literature review, as we said, you're summarizing what has already been written about your topic, synthesizing at the same time. But the reason why you are doing that, the purpose why you do that is number one, so that you do not repeat already done work. As I told you already, there will be a lot of charted territory already. You don't want to plow what has been plowed already. Sometimes you can still plow what has been plowed already, but because you are doing that thing with a new approach, a new tool, a new advancement. So if they have determined a property in the 80s using a very poor technique and crude technique, but now there is an advanced technique, you can revisit the problem. So it does not necessarily mean you are repeating what somebody has done, but there's a justification. So when you do that kind of literature review and you are repeating something that's been done already, but you are not looking at that thing from a new perspective, a new technology, a new approach, you can still justify it even though it has been done already. So even though you want to identify what has already been done, you can still do a chronological search where you point at how that was done. So that becomes methodological. So those are the key things that we need to, and you want to identify what are the major thinkers in the area, who are they? It's very important. Any discipline in which you are, it's always very important to identify who are the major thinkers. And those are the people. So as you do your literature review, you'll figure them out. Yeah, some of those people are going to be pioneers of their ideas. They're going to be landmark or seminar papers that will come from some top-notch scientists. And you want to figure out who are those major thinkers in the field. And their papers will become pointers to several other leading, very important papers that you want to identify as you do. So that's the purpose. As you do a complete literature review and I ask you who is the leading figure in this field and you cannot tell me, it means you haven't identified who are the major thinkers in the field. So that's something that you want to keep in your mind and think about as you do the review. You are not just figuring out what has been done already, but you want to figure out what are scholars, who are the guys with muscles in the territory that you are trying to explore. So the third point is you want to find out gaps and new directions that will help you to formulate your own research. That's the key thing. As you read every day, I tell myself, I set up alarm and reminders to my phone. I have journals that I've subscribed to, that every evening they will send me all the new papers that have come out. And I quickly will read through the abstract and read through the introduction and just figure out, oh, I'll quickly spot new territories, or they've done the work, but I will see gaps in the work. Is there some way I can fill in that gap to make that process or that particular phenomena more clear to people? Those are all things that we do in literature review. You're looking out for new directions, new gaps that are there for you to take advantage of and explore. So your goal as a reader is you want to also help your reader to distinguish between your work and the ideas of others. That's a key thing. You don't want to write and all of a sudden everybody will just tell you like, but all this is done already. Why are you wasting our time? But if you really do a due diligence of the literature, you will, by the time the person read, he will always, or he or she will be able to distinguish between your work and what you have already pointed out in the literature. So the list can go on and on depending on what we're looking for. So there is a basis for which your study can begin and hopefully which you can extend. Always, once you figure out the gaps, that is the beginning of your work. That's always the key thing you have to figure out. And every time you do a literature, every time you're about to do a new project, you must always find that justification for your work. Why are we doing? Where are you starting from? People have been working in the territory before. You want to track them till where they are now and what needs to be extended. That's a very important thing to keep in mind. You want to demonstrate an in-depth understanding of your topic area. You want to identify the main areas of agreement and controversy. And all these things are very, very important things to keep hold of as you do these things. You want to justify the methodology you are using. So as I told you already, if you are doing anything that is more methodological, if there is several ways by which different techniques have been used before, but you are applying a new technique, that means your review would try to highlight what other methods have achieved using those approaches. And then you are going to now highlight what have they been able to achieve, what were they not able to achieve. What you are proposing to do is to be able to solve the things that they were not able to achieve. So that's when it becomes very important when you do the type that you are trying to justify your methodology for a chosen or specific area of interest. So those are things that are very important. What literature review isn't, what it is not. Yeah. So it's not just simply listing references. It's not just like, oh, you just write a paper and just say X, Y, Z, and D have done this, and then you just list references 6 to 20 without saying anything. That's not what we call literature review. It's not just about listing all the review or the papers without saying anything about them and trying to synthesize them or connect the dots. That's not what it's meant by literature review. So, but what we're looking at is you want to present material. So presenting material that are not directly relevant to your study will distract and frustrate the reader and make them lose sight of the purpose of your study. Sometimes people tend to have the habit of maybe, oh, they just see some statement and it looks like you are reviewing something on obesity, and all of a sudden, if there's no linkage to any other condition or anything, just being all over the place by citing papers that have no direct connotation to what actually your subject topic is, it can become very frustrating. So the person will start reading, all of a sudden he sees that the guy is talking about sports, and all of a sudden he's talking about crop. Sometimes if he doesn't link the linkage very well and the connection is not there, you can frustrate your reader, and therefore the person doesn't really enjoy that type of reading. So you want to make sure that presenting superfluous information, things that are not really directly connected. So therefore selecting your literature, things to really include, becomes very, very important. So for instance, I put that thing in red, like a literature review that say, oh, a number of scholars have studied the relationship between X and Y, and simply listing who has studied the topic and what each scholar concluded is not going to strengthen your paper. So some people tend to have that habit where they just say, oh, there have been several reports on maybe high blood pressure, and they'll just put reference 6 to 20, and then they move away from that. They don't say anything again. That is not literature. Basically, what he did there is just listed the review. You could say that, but then you know, say, for instance, this et al. Has done this. You try and then try to link one or two few of them. So the connotation, just to generalize and just put in reference 6 to 20, 8 to 10, or 8 to 15, without saying anything specifics about them, isn't what you're doing. That's not a literature. You are not really connecting any dot. You just put out there a big ball, and you expect the people to go back themselves and read to know what references between 6 and 20 have said. Yeah, so that becomes very challenging for people to really do, and therefore you want to make sure you minimize those type of errors within your literature review. So the key thing is that a good literature review will always, the key thing is this, so it's always order the books or whatever article you're using to focus on unresolved debates, inconsistencies, any tensions, any questions in the research field. I always like that. Debates, inconsistencies. What are the tensions? What are the questions still lingering? That's what a good literature review points out. By the time you read a very decent literature review, a very good literature review, you will figure out what are the debates in the field. What are the inconsistencies in the field? What are the tensions in the field? What are the questions still lingering? And that needs further attention, further investigation. There may be a lot of those questions, but you aren't going to be the one to solve all of them. So maybe your research hypothesis or question you are trying to solve will become one of such questions you've identified as areas that still warrant further investigation. The key thing is that you want to look at for the relevant aspects of the scientific literature. And that is why I say that just throwing things out there which have no connotation, no linkage, will confuse your reader and make them very frustrated. Yeah. The key also is, remember, we talk about current research, but there's also past research. Depending on what kind of literature you are doing, sometimes you are narrowing your literature search to say, I want to only review things up to maybe 2020 or 2015 or 2013. You set sometimes targets, but always putting things into perspective is very important, depending on the subject area you find yourself as well. So the key thing is you are synthesizing the past as well as the current research on the topic, and how your research is going to fit into this past and current research. Very important. Sometimes we can focus too much on the current, but forget there are some amazing other scholarly work, the seminar works happened in the past. Again, it will become undignified or unjustifiable for you to, if there is a very stellar report or paper that you have completely ruled out, but it's the basis for all the current work, you want to point it out. You don't just want to leave it out. So you want to give your reader understanding of the background to the field. And this is what good literatures always try to bring to the table. So every discipline you are, every area you are, as you do this reading, let these words kind of resonate with you. What are the questions? What are the debates? What are the tensions? What are the gaps? What are the relevant literature I need to put out there? What has happened in the past? What is happening now? Those are the current trend. And then you try to look out for them. And then your goal now is to fit them together. It's like you begin to connect all the dots, how these can be integrated together very, very, very well. So I have this, I put here that how well you do a literature review depends on your title. It's always going to depend on your title. What are you going to do? If you choose a title that is too vague or all encompassing, what is going to happen is that you're going to have too much literature material to sift through. You just make it too vague. There's no, you did not really narrow it down to some specifics, because literature is always going to be out there. If you just talk about well-being alone, there will be thousands of material to sift through. But yeah, in the midst of the well-being of health of human being, there can be several things you can narrow down to. Maybe you are interested only in the well-being of our hearts or diabetes, any condition. So you narrow down the scope. If you make it too vague, you're going to have millions of material to sift through, and you never know how to really sift through those stuff. Sometimes if you make it too focused or too specialized, then it becomes too narrow a field. So therefore, you don't also have enough information to review. So it's always going to be a thread line between how focused it should be and how too vague it has to be. It's an interplay between the two of them. You want to choose your topic such that it's not too all-encompassing or just too vague all over the place, and not too specialized, because if we can, sometimes we can do specialized reviews as well. But if it's and we're going to see soon what kinds of literature are out there we need to do, then you will know how comprehensive you have to go and how less comprehensive you have to go. And this about the key thing is to figure out that if it's too vague, too many material to sift through, too focused and too specialized, too little information out there for you. Maybe a new area just evolved and you want to do a literature review on it. Maybe you may find only 3 papers or 5 papers because it's just too current, too new, it's too specialized. It's just a beginning field or an evolving field. You won't have much to review. So again, but if you try to link that new selective area, and instead of being too focused, you just open up some gap a little bit, you will find things you can connect with a similar topic. And that's the most important thing I wanted to point out there. So this is where it's also important. What are the common errors we make? We will soon get into the details, but I really want to point out this thing so that you will be on the lookout for yourself so that you don't make those same errors. So common literature review errors that we do. Number one, I say over-reliant on low-quality sources. Sometimes maybe you depend too much on secondary sources. Soon we will begin to look at the sources of data, where you're going to get your data. But for now, I'm just going to hang it out there. And I think that maybe low-quality source, you don't want to do all your literature review based on those information. And I will come back in a separate slide to tell you through what are the sources of data you need to do, and we can distinguish between them clearly. But you do a literature review and also completely lack any current literature. That can also be a very big mistake to make. You don't, even though we say you are synthesizing the past and the current, it doesn't mean that you do a literature review and completely just stuck with the past and not highlight any current things that is going on. The more current it is, they will have highlighted some of the past for you already. So there's the tendency is you want to really look at very, very current data, and they will also become sources of you finding out some of the past data as well. So very important that you don't do a literature review and lack completely all the current trend and things that are happening. If you do it and it's irrelevant or unfocused content, like I told you already, if it's irrelevant to the discussion, your reader is going to be very frustrated. Why is he or she saying this here? What has this got to do here? Yeah, so you want to make sure that irrelevant material, irrelevant context, not just because you see it in a particular paper that is maybe in the subject area, you just bring it into play. So as I said already, one of the key one is a lack of landmark or seminal literature. Every discipline has some landmark discoveries, some landmark seminal literature on the topic. For instance, You cannot do a literature review on two-dimensional materials, 2D materials, and maybe you won't talk about a seminar paper from Gann and co who discovered graphene. That's a seminar paper. It is what led to the booming of 2D materials. So if you talk about literature on two-dimensional materials, particularly talking about carbon-based ones, and you won't mention or talk about the seminar work that has come in the field, you have missed a point. So again, as you do your literature, you want to figure out what are those landmark, and there are several ways you would discover what is called a landmark paper, and I will show it in the next slide. But you don't also want to ignore contrary findings. That's a common mistake people make. They feel like they just want to write, they want to be politically correct. So they only want to say all the things that are good. They don't want to say anything that is a controversy, something that is contradictory. But that is not, your job is really to point out those things. You are doing a literature, it's not your own work at that time. You're only pointing out what others have done. So if there are contradictory findings or alternative interpretations, your job is to point them out. Yeah. And the key thing sometimes we do also is we don't allow sufficient time for these things. Sometimes we think that, oh, a student is writing a dissertation, he will leave it, it's maybe 2 weeks to the deadline, and that's when he wants to begin to dig out information. If you don't allow sufficient time, you won't do any due diligence to your literature review, because it's a very exhaustive process. It's a time-demanding process, and therefore always I advise students that that's something you want to really pay attention to. Even if you are a PhD student, master student, at the beginning of that's something you really want to invest in straight away, right from your year one. This, you know, the territory you're going to be venturing into already. Figure out what is happening in the area. And you could even, your first publication could even be a literature review. Then you have already do a proper due diligence to your field. So when you stand in front of someone you're talking, you know what you're talking about. Yeah, so it's very important that you allow sufficient time. Don't leave things to chance. A student can go through a 4-year PhD and only in the 4th year before he's not even doing a literature review of the topic. Only because that's only the time he's about to write a thesis. But that would be very disastrous. You don't do that. You do the literature review in your first year so that you know the gaps, so that when you start your research, you can begin to solve those problems. So allowing more time, it's very, very important. So sometimes people have this habit of just summarizing rather than synthesizing. It's not, literature review is not summarizing, it's synthesizing the results, connecting the dots, very important. Yeah, sometimes we also choose too problematic topic or irrelevant words when we are doing our search. Again, how you search information, when you begin to search the literature, you've got to figure out keywords to use to look at for the literature. There are going to be thousands of literature out there, but if your keywords are not there or descriptors are not there to pull out those information from the databases for you, you won't be able to get hold of the relevant paper. So again, choosing anything that's too problematic, keywords and subject headings or descriptors can be very terrible and make life difficult for yourself. And this one we can never do without is plagiarism and poor referencing. And that's a key tendency that we may all tend to have, that you're doing a literature review and all of a sudden you feel like you could just copy paste everything and not put your perspective into it and put things into your own word and your own perspective. That would be disastrous for you. You don't want to do that. Most of the time, there is a reason why you are synthesizing. You're synthesizing because you're putting yourself also into what has been done. And you're writing these things again from your perspective by just putting them together and connecting the dot. And then every time you connect those dots, you also want to do a proper due diligence of the reference, who has done it, give the credits to them, and make sure you specify them. Don't just say it in the open as if it's a statement from you or it's something that only your thought, because you're only putting in perspective the other person's work. So it's good to reference them and do due diligence with referencing. Plagiarism will always be a very key issue with regards to young writers and even accomplished writers. And it's something that must always show a red flag to you as you do. Let it ring in your mind that I need to minimize those issues with regards to plagiarism. And it's something that every researcher needs to be conversant with and needs to just have it at your back of mind, that I don't want to be caught into that habit where a good work I've done will just be completely disregarded. Yeah. So I talk about landmark literature. Typically, what will we mean by that? So for instance, if you're doing a search through a Google Scholar and you search a particular article, the landmark papers are typically, they're going to come with massive citations. It means that there were some points what led to the revolution of the field. So they generally tend to have very high citation indexes. They tend to, the citation counts. So if you do a Google search, for instance, on graphene, I know a colleague who is in the midst here who does a lot of work on 2D materials. But if you talk about graphene, yeah, the guys who discovered it in Manchester, one of them is Graham there, you will see that their papers will be significantly cited because those were the early days and the starting. Those are the landmark papers that led to the revolution in the area. So you will see a paper, it's cited there by 14,000 times compared to something that's cited 684, and as you go down the list. So they're going to clearly stand out. The question you have to ask yourself is, why is it that this alone is cited 20,000 times, 80,000 times? What about it? What is special about it? You want to quickly dig into it and see, were they the pioneers? Is that a landmark that revolutionized the field? You want to, what did they exactly do? What did they exactly point out? So definitely you want to make sure that those ones can form some basis when you start putting your arguments together within your literature. So we call those in landmark or seminal literature. And every field has it. Every field has it. When I do a lot of materials modeling and simulation, yes, a key figure, a person will be Walter Kohn. If I search papers on him, you will see that they will be cited over 20,000 times or 30,000 times because those were the basis upon which the field actually stand. So you don't want to just do this and the guys who actually do the due diligence, the hard work, you just throw them under the box. The literature won't be that great. So again, as you look out for, those can be common mistakes that people do in their literature review as well, where they just throw away the seminar papers, the landmark papers, because maybe they feel that is so old and they never make any mention of it. That would be disastrous, and it's not a good thing to do. So you want to look out for those things as well and figure out what are those landmark papers and point them out as clearly as possible. Yeah. So before we look at a few comments there, I'm going to dive into this, but I just want to a minute or two, any key indicators coming of caution or anything that we have heard so far that resonates with us or has some further clarification somebody wants to either comment or add something to with regards to their field, or a question or clarification.
Okay, we have some questions already.
Yep.
So I'm going to just copy all of them and okay.
You can just read it.
Okay. Yeah, so the first question says, please expatiate on different types of journals in terms of values, cost of publication, and time of publication.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll comment on that. So as I said already, we are all from different disciplines. So somebody is in material, somebody is in psychology, somebody is in biology or medical physics or anything. Our journals are going to be different. So and that is going to vary. So every discipline you are, there are going to be types of journals you publish in. I'm a material scientist, so I publish in a lot heavily materials-oriented journals. I will not publish in maybe in Lancet, which is a medical type of journal, because unless I do something on nanoparticle to really do some ablation damage to some cancer cell, I won't publish in those journals. So everybody will have their specific journals. When it comes to our field, yeah, depending on the journal, if you're in materials or chemistry or physics and you do things that are based on energy, you are targeting things like high impact journals, but not always the high impact is the key. There are also going to be intermediate journals which are excellent and really good. If somebody may publish in Nature Catalysis, but you can also publish in ACS Catalysis. Both of them are equally very good journal. One is more high impact, Nature Catalysis, but ACS Catalysis is a highly reputable journal. Somebody may publish in Nature Energy, but somebody will publish in ACS Energy Latex or ACS Applied Energy Materials. So that's going to vary from person to person. And sometimes these days we tend to put too much attention again on the high impact. Yeah, if the work warrants a high impact, you will know. It's just like you discover something extraordinary, amazingly good, and you feel like, yeah, this can make massive impact to the field. Yeah, you will target the high impact journals. So that's something I would advise people to do, but it shouldn't always be the best can always be the enemy of the good. So don't always be looking at the best and let it become the enemy of the good. There are a lot of very good journals. So whatever discipline you are, if you publish in ACS Physical Chemistry, the RSC journals, these are all very, very good journals, and your work is still going to be highly reputed, highly cited. So always keep it in your mind. As long as you will aspire to get a very high impact journal, Nature, the Science, and the advanced materials, etc. But yes, if you don't, your work doesn't get to that status, still go for the good ones. Those are called the best, but let them not be the enemy of your good, so that you feel like, oh, only this person is publishing this and I can get it. Yeah, your time will come. But in terms of whether they will, how long do they take? What is the cost of them? Yes, a lot of the papers these days are not necessarily like by force open access. So we talk a lot about these days open access journal publications. Again, some funders will look out for them that you have to make sure all your publications are open access. That means you have to pay the journal to publish your work in those open access. But it's not compulsory. There are still thousands and thousands of journals out there. Most of the good papers we just mentioned now are all going. Once your work is good, is accepted, they will publish it. You can choose to say it's open access, or you just want to make it the editor or the journal has the rights to copyright. So you don't necessarily have to pay to, and there are a lot of predatory journals out there now who are just looking for money. So they make everything open access. As long as you can pay, they will publish they will still do the critical review, but they will publish it somehow for you. So these are all trends you want to go on. Don't necessarily be going for the predatory journals, because sometimes it can damage your reputation. So watch out for those as well. How long will it take? Yeah, it varies from journal to journal. You should be looking out for things within 4 weeks. Some, if it's a very good paper, you can even submit and get a review back in a week. If it's a terrible paper, you submit it the same day, they will send it back to you the same day that our journal don't consider this. So it's varies from journal to journal. And whatever discipline you are, every journal you want to submit, you can read about the journal, and they will tell you their review process, how long it takes them, and how they make decisions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for that. The second question says, can I rely on one unique article published in a non-indexed journal? It's the only article I found related to one of the points I want to discuss in my literature review.
Yeah, that can be a very tricky spot. Does it mean that that particular thing you are doing is a very, very focused and very, very specialized review you do? That is why you're finding only one literature on? That's a question you have to ask yourself again. So that's, I said already, if it's too focused, if it's too specialized, you aren't going to find a lot of literature on it. Therefore becomes your force. And now you're talking about a non-index related publication that may make the case. But yes, it depends on how you're going to make that case, how you're going to put that case out there. And especially because if you're using it as a basis to justify what you're about to do, you really want to point out that this is such an important area. However, there is limited information out there in the literature. And that is the reason why your work warrants, that is why your work is timely. That is why your work is it's happening at such an important time. So it just depends on the kind of language you're going to use to buttress the point. If you say that it's such an important thing, however, there is completely negligence of the field or neglect of the field, and that is why there's not much information there, and you are beginning to fill in the gap, yes, you still make a very strong case for yourself. So I won't disregard whether it is in an index paper or not, as long as you make the case very clear that that is the issue with the area you are about to investigate and you are about to venture into. You are only use it as a weapon to say that this is the reason why your work becomes such an important at a time like this. Yeah.
Okay. This question is not so clear. It said, please search and give examples on teacher effectiveness.
The question again, that's not clear to me.
Search and give examples on teacher effectiveness. I think I would just go to the next question. Please.
Yeah, I didn't get that question well.
Yeah. Said, can we cite any preprints from AR6 in our literature review, or are there some restrictions from journals before publishing such a thing? And I'm going to add that with another question that says, what is the minimum year range for conducting literature review?
Okay. So with regards to the minimum year range, that's what we said already. That it's always about putting into perspective past and present. Even though you're going to rely heavily on present, that is again is going to vary from discipline to discipline. But as I said already, maybe the seminal things, the landmark things that have happened in the field may have happened in the 60s. Doesn't mean if you truncate your work in 2020, you completely ignore them. So it's just about how you link the story. It's about storytelling. It's a coherency. You want to connect the dot. So sometimes you don't overdwell on a past data, but you don't also want to miss out what are the landmark things. So you point them as an indicator that has opened the floodgates of the current things that we see and dwell on them more, the new innovations in the field, but not forgetting where it all started from. If they started with a very crude and primitive approach, you still want to point out them, but then now say there has been massive transition and revolution since those initial publications. And then you focus and now say, okay, this review is going to focus on this. So you can define your territory, your domain, and how expansive you want to do your literature. That's always going to be dependent on that. There's a slide I put there that literature review is like inviting people to a dinner party. And you are the one inviting the people. You decide where they sit based on their importance. So if they come, you say, you can sit here, you can sit here, you can sit here. So you decide what to put on the table. It's exactly the same thing in literature review. Sometimes you decide how to connect all these dots depending on how you want to tell the story. And therefore, if you want to pay due diligence to some part, you don't want to dwell, but you can point them out as indicators and now say this literature will rather focus on this. So it all depends on how you want to do it. I didn't get the first part of the question well, but I hope the second part is well answered.
Yeah. I'll move to this. Okay, regarding the plagiarism, so that there are some citations that you just have to quote exactly what this article says without changing any words.
Yes.
In that case, what do you do?
Absolutely. Yeah. Is there a follow-up?
There's another question that says that, okay, you said the person said that you mentioned that we should not ignore the origin of the research. But our supervisor does not accept reference that are more than 10 years. How should she go about it?
Okay, so that's a very critical sometimes disagreement between a student and a supervisor. So number one, in terms of the plagiarism as to whether you can quote, if you're quoting something, you state it is a quote. Those things are going to go into quotation. So there's just a way about which you put it. If you don't put it in a quotation and you say so and tal, like for instance, sometimes I can say that in a landmark seminar by Richard Kumar, he says that the interface is the device. Then I put it into quotes. So there I am quoting him verbatim, but I put it in quote. Yeah, you are allowed to do that. But you give the reference to who actually made the quote. You point out the person. So there's nothing wrong in quoting as long as you don't quote without making it look like a quote. Yeah. So that's when the problem is. And again, the student who says that whether my professor says that I disagree with you bringing a literature review, which is maybe 10 years older or 15 years older. Yeah, that is a discussion you need to. Every time I always say that if you are a student, it does not necessarily mean that the professor is always the reservoir of knowledge. And that is why you learn and you go back, have a discussion. If you're a PhD student, discuss with your supervisor, have fruitful discussions. Go and learn new things and come and teach your supervisor. Come and explain to your supervisor why you want to include that thing in your literature review. It's just about dialogue and communicating. If your supervisor find out that, hey, this student is such an intelligent kid and he really synthesized, it's about synthesis. How you connect the dots. If you talk about two-dimensional material and you cite a paper from Graham and from the guys who discovered graphene, why should your supervisor be angry that you cite a paper that may come 10 years ago? So again, you just have to let him know why it's such an important thing that you can't discredit such people or just point out without them. So it's a dialogue, it's a communication. And every time refine, fine-tune, it's not a linear process. Always go back and forth with the supervisor, but you're doing this from an informed position. It means you know your answers. You have done the due diligence to the literature and you know what is important. Your professor maybe is no more doing the literature. Sometimes we become too busy. We don't have the time to be doing all the reading. You guys do the reading and come and tell us. So if your goal is to come and convince us why you want to include that, why it's such a very important landmark paper that we can't miss out on our literature.
Wow. Yeah. So the last question says that, can you please explain more on the difference between indexed and non-indexed journals? Like, how can I tell indexed and non-indexed journal without necessarily relying on the journal's own description?
Yeah, that can be tricky. So you have what I will do, just give me a minute. I will come back and answer that person, because what I want to say, I want to be careful a little bit. So I will just take note of it, and I'll come back and answer that person, index and non-index. Yeah.
So I think we've taken
continue.
questions.
We've taken all the questions.
Yes.
Fantastic. So that's good. Let's then make some quick progress and answer. So these are all things that we need to. So keenly, I always say literature review is not a linear process. It's a back and forth process. There's a lot of things you're going to do. So different types of literature you can do. Some can be completely argumentative literature. You basically what you're doing is a type of literature that examines and analyzes literature in order to support an argument. So you have taken a stand because argumentative, you want to argue for that point of view. Those are called argumentative type of a case you want to make. Some can be interrogative, and where you're looking at being, these are critical reviews. Sometimes you can even publish a paper and somebody will write a rebuttal of your paper and criticize your paper. Yeah, you can publish a paper in 2 weeks. Somebody can write a rebuttal on that paper. Your paper becomes a source of somebody's paper. Yeah, it simply means they have found out some fault, they have found out some inconsistency in there, and then they can write a critical review of that paper for you, and they point out why such a result cannot be trusted, or why something is artificially, something isn't right there, and therefore needs to be revisited again. So those can be mainly critical type of reviews of a literature where a person is adding his perspective on the topic based on what somebody has already done or said. And those type of literature are there. There are a few people publish, some of them maybe only 1-page review of your paper, half a page, but it's still going to be published. It's just trying to point out that something isn't looking right here, and therefore he wants to point it out. Yeah, we can do historical review. Like I said, if it's historical, it means that you are doing an in-depth chronological from inception to where we are today. So you track the progress that has happened in the field in that area. People can do methodological reviews. Like I said, sometimes maybe that particular work has been done using other method, crude method. Those days, yeah, we always have to respect every era, whether the work is done in 1824 or 1624. That is the approach they have then. So if you're doing methodological, what were the methods there, and how does the method evolve over the years that are leading to the new advances we make today? We need to make sure those are the type of literature you do when you do methodological. There can be systematic reviews as well, as you do critically evaluate and summarize all the existing work. So those typically, there's a lot of work these days where people just publish systematic reviews. And that's why I say that if you're a PhD student and you are beginning to work on a specific area, your goal is always that, yeah, I want to write one systematic review, particularly on your subject topic. Yeah, write something, so spend a judicious amount of time to dive into all the things that are related, identify the gaps, and that can be published as your first paper, even before you begin to do complete in-depth analysis of laboratory experiment or theoretical experiment. And we all need it. And that already gives you a very informed position from the day one, from your year one. And it gives you the springboard to begin to jump and take up questions that are very hard and tough to answer. You can do theoretical reviews as well. This type of reviews examine available theories and relationships that are there. Sometimes I do a lot of modeling, which is mainly theoretical interpretations of materials and design of material. We have several theories and proponents there. Sometimes I can do a literature review on just pointing out what are the different theories regarding maybe band structure, regarding band gap engineering, regarding interface engineering in solar cell material. What are the theoretical concepts and precepts that are there? You can do those type of reviews as well. Those are purely theoretical. People can also do complete experimental review on synthetic approaches to making something. So there they're just pointing out how to synthesize nanoparticles. And if there are several approaches, they do an in-depth analysis on what are those various types of things that a person needs to do. So they will always be there. Once you start your literature, ask yourself this question: which type of literature review am I doing? Am I doing it as an argument? Am I doing it as an interrogative? Is it historical? Is it methodological? Is it systematic? Is it theoretical? You have to always know which one you are trying to do. That also informs you on the choice of your language, how you're going to be putting out your language out there. Yeah. So this is where things are going to get interesting. So as we said about the type of literature review, there can be, I don't know who's writing, but there can be several ways by which we do the literature review, and it can be as selective, and it can also be as comprehensive. It can be part of a broader work, and it can also be a standalone literature review. So we can publish papers that completely stand alone, and they are all literature, it's just all literature review. That can be a paper. But you can also put literature reviews can also be part of a broader work. So typically when you write journal publications, journal articles, we equally do literature review. But those type of literature review you do in a journal publication, if you are going to publish a work you have done, the type of work you're doing there is selective. We do what we call selective literature review there. We don't do comprehensive. But if you're doing a dissertation, it's still part of your thesis. So the thesis is the bigger thing, but your literature review chapter is part of the whole thesis. But that one, you cannot do selective literature review there. You do a broad, it's comprehensive. So your literature review you do in a thesis is comprehensive, but what you do in a journal publication, it's not comprehensive, it's selective, because the case you want to make there, you do selective. You pick out things that will buttress the specific subject that you are pointing out in the paper that you are writing. So that is part of a research article, a manuscript that you are writing. So those are selective. We don't go in depth, not as comprehensive. And that's something we need to keep in mind. But as I said already, we can also do standalone literature review. Sometimes you guys take coursework. If you're a student and you take coursework, the professor can give you to do a literature review on a subject. That coursework literature review is a selective type as well, because it's specific to something. So that is selective. But if you do a literature review analysis, which you actually call review, which is a standalone paper, so you want to publish in Nature Review, or you want to do a complete literature review on any subject of your choice, those are going to be very comprehensive as well, because you are really writing, it's not a manuscript, it's not a work you have done, you just want to do a review on the subject. So it's a complete paper on its own, it still has to be very comprehensive. And those are the key things that we need to keep in mind, that we can have selectivity, comprehensiveness, part of a work, and a standalone. Very, very important. And depending on which one you're doing, you should know which one you're doing. And therefore, you know how in-depth you should go and how non-in-depth you need to go. You don't do a journal article and your literature review page alone is 2 pages if you're writing a journal manuscript. When your whole introduction should just be 2 pages, if your literature alone is 2 pages, how many is going to be your pages of introduction? Is it going to be 5 pages? That will mean that your work is going to be too diffuse. It's going to be all over the place and people will not follow it. It's not concentrated. But if you do literature review for dissertation, oh yeah, it's not 2 pages you're talking about. It's a comprehensive thing you're doing. So it's just you have to know, what are you doing and what are you doing it for? What is it part of? Is it standalone? And those are key things that you need to watch out for when you do those type of review. So as we take that one after the other, just I will highlight a few things. So if you're doing a journal publications, which is the thing we do a lot. If you're in science or you are in behavioral science and medical science, whatever you do, everything you do, you want to publish it. That's called a journal publication. You got to publish your work. And that's something I want to tell every young person here, every genius that is out there. You want to make sure that your work can only be relevant and seen until it is published. Science is all about communication. It's not about doing. You do, but you need to communicate. So as we publish work, these are all things. Again, literature review is going to be a key part of it. So in journal publication, the introduction will be related to that's where your literature review part will come a little bit in. They are generally shorter than standalone review. We don't want to go to, they're narrow in scope, they're very selective. And often we use a set of a precedent to support the theory or method that we are about to do. So you have done some work and you have already a theory, a support, a hypothesis. So the selectivity you're going to do there are going to be the papers that support that argument or that have done something similar like that. That's why it's selective. Yeah. So very important. You don't just go and start saying things that will completely override and then negates everything you're going to say, follow up in your manuscript. So that's why they're very selective. So in general sense, there's kind of a funnel. You start very broad, and this slide will be made available. But the key thing is that you distantly, so as you begin those parts of your introduction as part of an article, your introduction actually highlights the broader background to the thing before you begin to narrow down to what are the things that are related to that thing that you're about to do. So as you go through the funnel, the more down you get towards the lower part, you are now going to categorize close to your research. What are some of the things that can relate to what you are going to be doing? So research that is particularly pertinent to your work. things that are very relevant, they come around this area. At the top part, it's still very broad. You want to give us a scope. That's why those are part of an article. You begin broad, in between, you begin to narrow, and down there, you begin to point out things that can support the argument you're about to make, and then point out some of the gaps in them, and then now do them. So that's the key thing that we need to watch out for. It's a funneling process where we sift through and get to the concentrated region where we point out what is mainly pertinent to our work, what are some of the gaps there, and how we are going to fill it in. Yeah. However, when you do a standalone review, no more in a journal, standalone, and I will encourage everybody to try it one time. If you're a PhD student, a postdoc on a subject area, they tend to be the most cited papers. If you really want to beef up your citation index on counts, take up some very important topic. If it's in your area, write a very in-depth review on it. That paper will become the source for everybody. They will cite it for you several times, and you will just be there. Even in first year, you already have 50 citations, 100 citations, because you have done a very decent literature review on the subject area. So I will encourage everybody, if you're here after this, begin to think about it. That's something I really want to do, and it should be helpful to me. So in those ones, you present and analyze a much more relevant literature as possible to the background. It's more broader, you expand it, and you can see the red I put there. It's an excellent source for initial research about an area or topic. They are always highly cited. If you do a very due diligence in a standalone literature review, and it's current, so if you publish it 2022, everybody will be looking for that one. Once they see it, you will tell them to find all the other ones. So they will always cite a paper. And that's the key thing. That's the reason why your citation count will also grow exponentially as you try to invest. They may be time consuming, but they are worth it in the long run. Yeah. And the key thing we focus in standalone papers is not necessarily the introduction part. We focus a lot more in the method and the results. So if you are doing a standalone and you are reviewing your literature, you are actually looking at what method did the people use, what results did they obtain. Those are the ones you're going to be using to synthesize and connect the dots and link up to several other things. So remember that as you read different papers and you want to use them to write a standalone review, those are the main areas you want to focus. How did they do the work? What kind of result did they obtain? Those are things that you are going to now use to make your case for your standalone review paper. So present and analyze the most relevant texts and explain the approach and the theory they have used. They're generally broader in scope. They are more extended analysis. All sessions refer literature than to a current work. So it's the literature you're doing there. It's still going to be extensive. You want to give credit to all the people who are working in the area. And that's why people will find it. Once they find yours, they'll find all the other ones. Yeah. So it's very important that we pay a lot of attention to that. So this is where we're going to begin the step-by-step of doing it. Now we know the background. We know everything. Now let's go deep now, step by step. So how is the literature review process altogether? I wrote there in red that literature review is not usually a linear process. That's the first thing you have to know. It's not a linear process. It's not like, oh, I start from here and I'll finish it there. No. It's back and forth. It's a cycle. You go hexagonal, you go zigzag, because you're connecting dots. So sometimes you even finish reading the literature only to realize, oh, I need to go back and read again. All of a sudden I see that this argument rather needs to be in paragraph 2. You shift them. So it's all about shifting and fixing it. That is when you are doing what we call synthesis. You are synthesizing the literature, where you are connecting work that are related together and those that are conflicting together and trying to make the case. So the chronology, it becomes, so it's not just a linear process, and we need to have that at the back of our mind that you need more time to do that. And that's why you don't wait 3 days to the deadline for anything you want to do before you start a literature review. You will be found one thing. So in step 1, I call it that you need to choose the focus area. Choose a topic. Yeah, everybody has a topic. We are not all doing the same thing. I'm a material scientist, and all my PhD students don't do the same topic. They have different things. Somebody is working on batteries. Even if we come to batteries, there is a lot of type of batteries. There will be lithium battery, lithium sulfur battery. There will be all kinds of batteries. So everyone has their own narrow focus, their own domain. That is what they want to specialize in. That's what they're going to do. Somebody may be in catalysis, but that's their work is not just catalysis. Catalysis is too big. There are different kinds of catalysis. So again, defining your topic and choosing the focus you want to explore. It's always the key step. That's the starting point. You want to make sure you know that niche area. What kind of question are you trying to address? What topic are you trying to pick? Is there some negotiation you need to do among yourself and down select and minimize so that you are crispy and clear about what you want to do. So that's what I always put here, that, and that is where basically more often you choose a topic you're familiar with, or that is the some area you are working. It's not like you just stumble upon it. It's something you are interested in, something you want to know more about, or you already have some knowledge about and want to expand it. And typically there are also topics that are current, well established, and have ample research to review. You also want to look at topics your readers or researchers will be interested in. Yeah. And like I told you, if you want to beef up your dissertation, there's a lot of interesting things going out there in every area. Those are things you want to write a review on, because people they are dying for those information. You want to be the pace setter. You want to put those together. People are generally lazy to go and be digging information. But so if you can manage to synthesize it together for them, they will pay you the respect. They will cite you. They will give you the due diligence. But it's painstaking. It's not straightforward. And that is why not everybody does it. But I encourage people to invest time in it. So as you choose the topic, your area in established area, things that your people will be interested in, you will find out that all of a sudden you'll find some sweet spot, very sweet spot. There's only there. You feel like, oh, this area, I can now focus. Because as you go through those 3 cycles, you will discover the sweet spot. What you feel like, oh, people will be, it's something that is catchy, it's something that is relevant, it's something that people, if I put out there and I write on it, it's going to be attractive to people and it's going to be relevant to advancing the field that I'm working in. Once you find that sweet spot, you can begin to do a lot of other things. So you find your sweet spot. That is at this point, that is a point where you can adjust your scope of the article you are doing or the literature review. You can fine tune. That's why it's not a linear process. First, maybe you have a very myopic view of something, but as you start to discover and you find your sweet spot, oh, you say like, oh, I started off thinking this, but let me refine a little bit the argument. And then you can do all of that. So your sweet spot finding is very, very important as you do literature review. So at that stage, you can down select, you can change your research question, you can fine tune things a little bit, and if you find out the keywords that you will need to use when you're searching for the literature. So that is step 1. Find your sweet spot. What is that sweet spot where there can be more juice, more honey, the delicate honey that everybody is looking for? That's what you want to figure out, and then give it to them, and everybody will love it. Yeah. And therefore, once you do your step 1, the next thing is you have now identified that sweet spot. You find out the keywords, you find out things that are relevant, and you want to begin to dive into, okay, now let me gather some literature. Let me find some sources, some information that is going to help me out there. So step 2 is actually where you're collecting your scholarly information and from all different kinds of sources. And so here I put the ones that are going to be more primarily related. I'll go to the next slide where I will show you the other one. Primarily related are going to be scholarly articles that you want to dive into. Sometimes they're going to be books. You have conference papers, you have dissertation and theses and things like that. They generally will serve as main source or primary source that you want to be concentrating more on. And this is where I want to point out that, yes, I understand that one of the key challenge we have in some countries, or generally in most African countries, we don't have subscription to a lot of these scholarly journals and publications. And it's always going to be a big issue, a big challenge that is always going to serve as a limitation to many of our people and some of these genius in rural areas and where they don't have subscription. But this is where I really want to implore and ask that we all need to come on board. We need to help each other. Sometimes if you discover Fumi is in University of Florida now, and you need a paper that you can't get access to, you can send her an email if you have her contact. And that is why I will talk about networking. It's not part of the literature review, but I just want to throw it out there. These are the only way you can circumvent the wheel. There are several ways to kill a cat. Don't just know only one way to kill that cat. If you can't kill it this way, find out an alternative way to kill it. You know that I'm here in Penn State, reach out to me, connect in LinkedIn, connect everywhere you can connect with people who can matter to you. And explore and expand your horizon. Whenever you need something, reach out. And people may help download those papers within a second and send it through an email. So we need each other. We need to help each other. Every genius needs to support the other genius. And every genius needs to see the potential in another genius and also identify with their challenges and their shortcomings and be there to help each other. So that is what I would say about that. There's no other 2 shortcuts I can give you how you can get those papers. The only way is we need to support each other. If you have the subscription, fantastic. If you don't have it, reach out to those who have it. So we need to figure out all those things. When you do all this, that is what we actually call the literature, where you are really finding these sources and discovering and selecting your information from these primary sources. Those are the literature. You are gathering the literature, the things that are out there that has been published, that has accredited, have been peer reviewed, and have been subjected to questions and criticism. They've been rebutted, they've been addressed, and they are accepted and published in primary sources. Those are things that you really want to use as your source. So generally, we may have this type of resources. You have primary sources, which we just talked about, and that is the one I will employ and encourage more people to use when they do their literature review. There can be secondary sources and they can be tertiary sources as well. As you do your tertiary sources, those are things that you're going to be picking from Wikipedia and some guides to some literature or some catalogs in some library. But those are going to be tertiary information. Not every information, yeah, Wikipedia can be trusted, but it's not necessarily the primary source of information. So you don't want to just do a complete literature review and everything you pick is just from Wikipedia. That will be disastrous for you, because your focus should be on the primary sources. Primary because these are the ones that are originally generated. They are the ones that have been subjected to, okay, before you get a paper published, oh man, you got to be subjected. There will be peer review. There will be a lot of questions. You will address all of them. So that is how we can trust them. We know that they have patents and things that you do are primary sources. Your secondary sources are things here. If you don't find them book, you need some databases and bibliographies. You want to go to maybe those ones and pick some of those data that are archives and documented in those bibliographies. Those are secondary information. Sometimes people rely too much on the secondary information. Like sometimes I will call them maybe a little bit of low grade, but we want to stick a lot more in things that have been peer reviewed and that are actually the main source of primary information that we want to dive into. So those are how you can get those information. And as I said already, if you can get hold of it, reach out to somebody who can get hold of it. That's how we support each other. That's how we grow. Yeah. And once you know the sources you want to do, there are several ways you can find them. And depending on your field, there are all kinds of things you can use to find literature these days, and using the right keyword, the right tag word, the Boolean, anything. Google Scholar these days have a huge repository of any documentation of papers and reviews of papers that are published. Those in the medical science, the PubMed, you can use that. You have more journals that are related to medicine. You have your Web of Science, huge repositories of scholarly works that have been published over and over years. You want to use these tools to search your literature. The EBS Co is also a huge database of scientific and peer-reviewed papers. People in economics can use EconLeaks, where they publish a lot of economics journals. Justo is there. The InSpec, a lot of physics journals are published there. The psychology people may be using PsycInfo. So every discipline you are, there's sometimes some databases that may be related to where you can start digging. Sometimes you may find something in Google, maybe you can find the same thing in Web of Science. So you will have to use them concurrently, and that's the beauty. Don't just rely on one thing, especially when you're searching. That is why it's called searching. Searching means that you look around, don't just look only one direction. Yeah, that is why it's called search. A camera, that's why I put a camera there. Cameras are things that rotate. You can turn it around so that you can see things from different view. If you just point the camera in only one direction, you'll only be seeing the same thing. But if you move your camera around, you will find a lot of things, 360 degrees explore, so that you can have things from different view, and or things that is missing maybe somewhere, you can catch it in another one. You don't want some very important paper to slip through when you do a literature review. So you want to catch them all. Yeah. So explore your network, explore the scope and the tools you use to discover those things. Yeah. And in terms of the search process itself, there are several ways you can do. The key thing I always tell people is use keywords. If you go to Google search and you type maybe too many words, it becomes very hard. So you can use keywords. Sometimes we can even use and, or these are called Boolean points, just to connect things that you are looking for. The keywords that you want to search, as you search them, Google will display them, bring them together. So for instance, if you search for a word like genetics and parenting, so it means that if you search using the Boolean and, genetics and, it's going to search through that archive and bring out every paper that has genetics and parenting together on it. And those are what you want. So you use Boolean points. Sometimes you can use keywords, you can use terms, or you can use phrases. You can find out all of those things yourself. So sometimes if you type materials for energy, if you don't put it in quotes, maybe it doesn't bring all of that for you. But if you just put it in quotes, materials for energy, it's telling the search that search through the whole archive. Anything that has these three words following each other, materials for energy, bring them out. It will bring all of them out. Yeah. So it just depends on how you search the thing. You can use Booleans, you can use keywords, you can use phrases, and that helps to narrow down the search to specifics of things you're looking for. So as you go into each of those tools that you can use, begin to explore, use these approaches to help you to narrow down your search and get the right relevant text, relevant information for yourself. So there's something I call citation chaining. So you manage to get a very good paper, maybe on a subject. Like somebody said, maybe I found only one paper. It's so good. You feel like, I don't want to let go of this. This is like honey. You just keep eating it and you feel like it's so sweet. But then you can use that become what we call citation chaining. A chaining simply is a process in which you use one good information source, such as an article relevant to your topic, and use it to mine, because that is like you want to mine gold. You feel it as gold, but that can bring you more gold. So you use it, and we can do backward chaining or forward chaining. So if I find a very good paper and I use it and I look at all the other references that are cited in that paper, I am doing what I call backward chaining. But then as soon as I figure out that paper and I look at how many papers have cited that paper. So you see the publication, but you see that people have cited that paper. So those are going to be forward chaining, because everybody's citing those work have come after that work has been published. So that's called forward chaining. But if you use the references that are therein in that actual paper, you are doing backward, because that person is citing all the papers that are published before him or her. So both approaches are very good. And I always encourage people to do that. If you do forward chaining, basically, for instance, if I just go to Google Scholar and I even search, let's say, I'm just going to search graphene or anything, interface engineering. So I look at this paper, I say graphene and status. If I want to do forward search, these are the papers, these are people who have cited this guy. So they've cited means that these ones have come after this one. There's about 14,000 something. That may be loud, but you can click it and just begin to roll through and see which one may even be relevant to your topic. So it can help you to discover some new material which are more current than the one that you think that is the honey, because there are more honey after the original honey you found. So that's what we do by what we call citation chaining. The chaining is you can do backwards and you can do forward. And more progressively, I do a lot of the forward, but I also look therein sometimes just to check what is the backward offering. But if you want to drive towards the forward, that is the current, those are the one you want to go forward. Yeah. So the question is, when should you stop searching? This is a question I want to ask everyone. So if anybody is in the audience who wants to answer that question, can raise your hand and answer it. When should you? So you have been searching, you have gathered, you are collecting and collecting and collecting. When do you stop searching so that you can actually do the writing?
Okay.
If anybody can unmute, so at this point you can let everybody unmute themselves if they want to say just 1 or 2 sentences.
I think you can talk now.
So I think we will never stop searching. Even we are writing our thesis, we will still be on searching.
Yeah.
So maybe when we will finish to define our thesis, then we will stop searching.
Maybe when you finish define your thesis. Okay, that's one answer. Anybody else? Any thoughts?
Sophie?
Yeah. Thank you. I think this is amazing. Honestly, I just feel as if this is my first time of learning something about research, despite doing research for many, many years. So thank you so much. This is an excellent thing. I'm very happy to be associated with that. And this is a push-up for us to do more.
Yep.
I have less shorts of words to explain how I'm feeling, but I assure you this is really great.
Okay. Thank you. So like somebody said, thank you, that we never stop searching. Yes, yeah, they will always be there, but there will be a point where you're just going to say, okay, maybe enough, because if I continue searching, I will never do the writing. So yeah, the point where you stop maybe on a particular subject, whatever you're searching is, you keep searching and now you are finding over and over the same thing you have found already. So you dive and it's like you are mining and mining and mining and mining, and you keep the paper you have already read, you find the same paper again. All of a sudden, you find the same paper again, the next paper again. So it means that more or less you've exhausted the cracks and the crucicles, everything. And therefore, regarding that topic, maybe it's a time for you to say, okay, I think I have gathered enough. Now let me synthesize them. If not, you just continue searching and only be discovering the same thing over and over and over again. So that is the point where you can convince yourself that maybe it's time for me to proceed. Yeah. And again, as you gather references, it's always very important to know how to manage your reference. Manage. This is a topic I can teach in a completely new way on how to manage references. But today is not the purpose of teaching you how to really use these things. There are several ways and techniques to use how to use these things. But I implore you, look for their names and see if you can use them to manage your references and gather your references. Very important. Poor reference management can lead to sometimes students write and they even forget which paper they have picked that information from, just because of poor management of the reference. So it's very important that as you start to read and discover the relevant papers, you take note of them, you accumulate them in a well-management tool. And the citations are very important. Don't just do anything without citing people's work. The reason why we cite work is to make sure that we help others to find the information that you have used. You want to help to establish the credibility of your own work because you're citing that this has been done by these scholars, distinguished people. You connect your work to other people's work. In several ways, you are entering dialogue with other people. So very important, citation I can't underestimate it for you. And you need to learn how to manage your references, especially when you're doing literature. There's going to be lots of literature you're going to gather. Make sure you take note and track of them and manage them well. So in your step 3, now that you have searched the literature, you have gathered a lot of information and you dive in now. The step 3 is actually where you are analyzing the network of information and you are selecting the work you want. Yeah, not everything that you find is going to be relevant. That's why I say you are mining, but when we mine, you are looking for gold, but there will be some copper there. You're looking for gold, but there will be some nickel there. You're looking for anything, but there will be some impurities. The impurities are not what you want, so you have to sieve them out. You have to pick the gold and drop the guys. So after you obtain your references and the topic, you will need to carefully read them and evaluate them so that you can make choices. Some of the references will turn out not to be helpful. Some will be helpful than others. Some may not even have any relation, even though the topic says that they're going to have relation. But you start reading and realize that, this one is not going to be. So this is a very, evaluation process is a time-consuming part of the literature review because now you are reading actually to select things that are pertinent to your work. And it's very time-consuming part of the review. But that's the part that you have to, that's why you have to stop at some point searching. You cannot just continue searching because there's a more difficult task coming. You can keep gathering and gathering and gathering, but if you have not read them, it becomes hard. Yeah. So your review should be selective. That's a very key thing. A common mistake is to include everything you have read, regardless of its relevance. Everything you read, regardless of its relevance. That would be a terrible thing to do. So select the golds from the copper, select the gold from the nickels, and drop all the things that are irrelevant to what is of interest to you. Yeah, you will need to work on developing your own criteria for the bodies of literature you include or the scholars you include in your work. And the main criteria I use is 1, what is its relevance to my studies? Number 2, what is the importance of it to the field? Those are the criteria. When I start reading the papers, I want to see that, is this really relevant to the field, the thing I'm about to talk about? Is it relevant to projecting the field of research? Then you can use them. So that's why I put that analogy I put you already. It's like a dining table where you have people, you decide where people sit. You decide who to invite, who to include in your invited guest list. And that's the kind of thing. It's very crucial. The relevance to the subject you're interested in has to be very clear. Yeah. So that is what you're doing, the analyzing, reading, and selectively picking out what is more important. And there are several questions you can ask yourself when you do this review. And when you're evaluating, you ask questions like, what is the research question are these people solving? What is the primary methodology used? How was the data gathered? How did they present the data? Did the artists interpret the result well? Are they convincing? What are their main conclusions? What are what questions are the conclusions they have drawn? Are they reasonable? These are all things that we want to figure out. Yeah. So you ask all these questions, that helps you to tell whether this paper is good for me to include or not good for me. Yeah. And step 4, describe and summarize each selected paper. So as you start reading them, you're evaluating them, you start picking, oh, this is very important. This one is good. This is relevant. This is relevant. The next step is to begin to summarize. Write the relevant things that make that paper relevant. What did they do? So determine some key 2 to 3 important sentences or concepts that you can summarize. And this way you can write. This way you can either type a note or you're writing notes yourself. What are they looking at? What is the paper looking at? Are they looking at particular conditions? Like for instance, we take the case study of a heart disease. There are some terminologies, atherosclerosis, hypertension, obesity. But you say maybe young et al. Maybe that's the paper you read and you feel that paper is so good. They study the obese patients and attempt to measure the effect of chronic hypertension on atherosclerosis. So you summarize, you know what exactly the paper did, what did they find, what are the key things. So you summarize those things and they help you when you begin to connect the dots. Connect the dots. So this is what you're summarizing. And this part, always I encourage people to write. When you read, the next follow-up is write. You can read, but you like what you have read, but if you've not written it down, 2 days after, you have completely forgotten what you have read. You don't even know which paper you read it from. So as soon as you see it and you like it and it resonates, it's relevant, document it. Write the key finding. What did they find? What did they discover? Summarize it. They help you when you begin to connect the dots. So the introduction to this section. So for instance, as you write these parts in summarizing, this can be relatively summaries. You summarize them. But when you do that in maybe literature review and standalone, this can be more extended. So always keep in mind that they can be part of a project or standalone. Yeah. And your step 5. Oh, very important part. Now you have chosen, you have written down some important concepts from different papers that you have selected to be part of the invited guest list. Now you need to synthesize them together. You need to put them together, connect the dots. So demonstrate how the concepts in the literature relate to the results of study, establish how the literatures are connected. That's synthesis. So you realize the analysis basically is just a breaking down the literature review, but synthesis is an art of making connection between those parts, how they identify with analysis. Very, very important. We need, every good literature review has to synthesize, not just to analyze or summarize. Connecting the dots, it's very, very, very important. That's when you identify the linkings, the position of sources, identify recurring trends and any disagreements. That's why you pick them out, because as you summarize them, so and so et al. Have said this, but the other person has said another thing. And that's why you begin to connect those dots. Yeah. So that's why it's very relevant. I put this analogy here, but you have a paper, you found A is saying something good based on what you want, and that is supported by B. But then you realize that D also supports B, but all of a sudden you find a paper C which disagree with A. So those disagreements can be there. Your goal is to be able to connect these sentences. So your goal will be try to group maybe A and B and D together, and then now you see to counteract them and say, however, after this has said this, you try to go into that detail. So that's when the grouping becomes important. Find things that correlate with each other, agree with each other, but there will always be things that contradict them. You want to point out how the contradiction came about and why the differences in them. So more or less the last step, which we call actually where you have to write. So you connected all those dots of thought process. Now it's time to really write the literature itself. Right. Now you gathered everything. Your thought process has mixed all the things and you know where to link what and what. Begin to link them now into actual full-scale writing of the literature. So like any academic, you want a very good introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Typically, that's the format you're going to follow. You introduce the literature, you're going to have to dive into the body of volumes of all the things you've summarized, connecting their dots, and then the conclusion part comes. So that's the typical structures you may follow. And sometimes when you do a standalone literature review, you may have an abstract. Those ones will still have, because it's a paper, so it still needs an abstract. But if it's part of your thesis and literature review part, you just introduce it. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily need an abstract there. So, and as you write literature review, always be in the habit of creating subheadings. Subheadings. If it's a very large, especially for dissertation, create subheadings, very good subheadings, so that you can focus on specific aspects of the literature in relation to those subheadings. So divide your literature into meaningful sessions. Don't just write everything together and it's just going to be all over the place. But if you think that some things can fall in a specific heading, create that subheading for it so that you become focused and concentrated, so that the person knows exactly what to look out for when they're reading that section of your literature review. And it's very, very important to keep that in mind. So generally, those are the 6 key steps that I always encourage and I always employ myself in everything I do. The rest of the things is just basically connecting the dots. How do I do it? Do I do by chronological, by time, by theme, by methodology? It's just going to be based now on your discipline and the kind of research you want to do. So you can do all type of these things. The key is the dots. Introduction. Your body parts can have different topics, different subheadings. Topic 1, subheading 1, subheading 2, but there's always a cross link. They still have to link up with each other somehow. connect the dots. As you said, oh, as we introduced in section 3.4, so this, but now you're referencing again, you're linking them. That is synthesizing the literature. Yeah, very, very important how you organize them. Chronology simply means you're looking at things as the scale move. Yeah. Okay. So what I want to do now is I'm getting to some specifics, and I will try to wrap up. But before so those are the steps we've looked at. But before we take an example of how an abstract should look like, how an introduction should look like. So we have some examples. I will do that, and then that will lead towards the ending part of the seminar. But before we go into details of that, again, want to open the floor just briefly for some questions again on the steps we've looked at.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. This is really a very great training. I'm also learning. I'm planning to do my literature review immediately. Okay, so one of the questions, okay, are we talking about the indexed and the non-indexed now or later?
I would say it's in the last part, yeah.
Okay, so the question says that, okay, the literature review-based journal paper would be in what category?
Repeat the question again. The literature?
The literature review-based journal paper would be what category? That if you're publishing it, what category are you publishing?
So that's a standalone. So basically, the literature review, if you want to publish, so you're writing a literature review, just not based on any work you have done. You're just synthesizing the literature. We call those things standalone. They're not part of a journal publication. So there are two types. It's part of a journal, or it's either a standalone publication, which is a literature review. So sometimes you see those ones, they may even have the title literature review in it, as part of the title. But most often in the sciences these days, we don't necessarily include the word literature review. But in the social sciences and health sciences, I see that a lot, where even the title will have literature review in it. But in the sciences and material these days, we don't necessarily include literature review in it. But those are going to be standalone. And every journal these days accepts literature reviews, and they publish them a lot. Yeah.
Okay. So the next question says that sometimes topics that are proposed for a study may be broad. Do we have to do a literature review to target the specific area of the topic? Or we have to, the topic we have to study, or we have to get a well-defined topic before going into the literature review?
Yeah. So that's a very good question. I always say that every time we always talk about being broad, but I think every research you are going to embark on is going to solve a particular problem. Every research is going to be specific. If you talk about climate change, it's broad. If you talk about global warming, it's broad. But what are you going to do about global warming? It becomes specific. What are you going to do? What approach are you going to employ to solve your challenge of the problem? If you talk about renewable energy, it's broad, but you can break it down. Maybe you're not going to do all the renewable energy. You're going to do maybe solar cell. That's enough. You're going to do maybe hydrogen production. You're going to do biomass. You're going to do hydro. There's going to be specific. So you can start broad, why renewable energy is important. What are the type of renewable energy? You are narrowing it down to the one that your research is going to focus on. So they will always be broad, but I always also believe that no research is always going to be infinitely broad. You must break it down. You can't just do everything. Yeah. So that is why you will narrow it down until you figure out what you need to do. Yeah.
Okay. So the next question says, how does somebody connect all his objectives with his obtained results?
Yeah, very important. So you set up to do something. That's why your objectives are always going to be clearly defined from the beginning of the work. So you have figured out the loopholes, the shortcomings, the gaps in the literature. Based on that, you propose some objectives you want to do. You are setting out objectives that, okay, by the end of this study, we will do this, we will do that, we seek to do that. Now go and do it. When you finish doing that, ask yourself, did I really answer all those things I said I was going to do? So for instance, if I think I'm going to characterize the surfaces of the material and predict accurately its optical properties, at the end of the day, did I predict the optical properties? Then I can say that, yeah, that objective is met. So that's why we set objective. Your objective is set so that it can guide you on what kind of research you should do. That's why when you just start doing research without objectives, you are just like somebody walking aimlessly in a park, doesn't know which direction you're going. So anything that comes, you do it, but you don't even know why you are doing it. Yeah, so always good to have objectives here.
Okay. Okay, I have a question here. What is an empirical review, and what category or type does it fall among the ones you discussed?
So empirical.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's if you're doing empirical review, it just depends on what exactly we're looking at. The empirical, sometimes people can look at it whether you are basing it on purely theoretical base type of research and gathering just information on theory. Empirical, sometimes you see we can have an experimental way, but sometimes we just base it on some arguments based on the information out there. So the key thing, if you're doing it purely on theoretical, empirical basis, those reviews are also publishable. They publish a lot of them, like I told you already, the type of, so that may be falling sometime maybe in the theoretical part of synthesis or a way of looking at it. So you always create that niche for yourself. Why, even though you may call it empirical, but it's still a literature review. It's just a type that the kind of material you are putting together are going to be things that you are going to just be extracting from other sources based on theories and governing principles. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question here. If I publish the results as data or preprints on ResearchGate, does that affect their use in later manuscripts submitted for publications in journals?
So you have already published the work. You want to reuse the same data you publish? That's what the question is saying?
Yes. Published on ResearchGate and now wants to like reuse it for publications in journal.
Oh, okay. So in ResearchGate, so meaning at that time it's not published as a peer review paper.
Yeah.
It's just you just somehow posted your preliminary data or some information out there. Yeah. If that is it, it's not peer review, it's not anything. Sometimes maybe you're jumping the queue and you want to show that you are doing something, and so you want to be relevant. Yes, you can still use it. The key thing you have to know also is that if it's, I will advise that if it's such an important data or something that you feel, that's it. It's a research field. Everything you're doing, somebody else is also doing something. You have competitors all over the place. So sometimes if it's a very important data, you don't necessarily want to put it on ResearchGate first, unless something else is driving you to do that. But nothing stops you from, if it's not scholarly reviewed or anything, to publish that work if you finally do that. The only thing that may be a caveat disadvantage to you is somebody may pick that result because you realize that you didn't publish it and also follow through it and publish it before you. If it's published before you, then you cannot publish your own. Yeah.
So Bashir, you can ask your question.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. It's quite a rich presentation we had. My question goes like this. What do you understand by peer review paper? Because you've been talking about peer review paper.
Oh, okay. So when we talk about peer review paper, it simply means that you submit a paper to a journal, the editor will read the paper and say that this paper is important for a journal. Then he will then send your paper to some people who work in that area, scholars in the field. So he sent it to 3 different people. They don't have to be in the same university. He send one to somebody in China, somebody in Japan, somebody in the US. Those people will read your paper and critique it. They either agree with you or they ask you that this is not complete. Can you do this? Can you do that? We don't agree with this. And they say either reject the paper or you have to do this before we accept the paper. So you go through that process. That is called peer reviewing. So they review your work, they criticize it. Sometimes you feel like crying when they send the review comment back to you. But
yes,
you got to rise above them. When you do that and the paper is finally accepted, that is what we call a peer review paper.
Okay, because we sent a paper to a journal body once, then there was a time they rejected it. I think there was 2 times, two journals actually rejected it. We had to do some input again, then we sent it to another journal body whereby they accepted it. So they had to review it first before they gave us a response. That's what peer review is all about.
Yeah, peer review must, that is why I say that there are some predatory journals out there as well. And that is why we need to be careful whether these people are doing decent peer review or they just want your money and publish your work. So that you have to be on the lookout for those things as well.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
So Ahmed, you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Thank you very much. My name is Dawilbid Ahmed. I'm a Sudanese. I'm joining from Shanghai, China. Actually, it is very important topic, and thank you very much, Doctor, for this impressive lecture. What you spoke about, it is a narrative review. There is another part is a systematic review for
Yep.
medical. That is it. That part, it has its own rules and regulation. Mine, I am a material scientist. I'm doing as same as you spoke about, this narrative review. My question is, what is the difference between mini review and perspectives and literature review as a standalone? Because for mini review and perspectives, what is the difference?
Oh yeah,
the specific difference between them. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, so starting from perspective simply, they are very, very short. Perspectives are very, very short. So perspective simply means that typically they are received, sometimes they can be invited. Most often you don't necessarily you can write a perspective and submit a journal, but sometimes the editor can also invite you to send a perspective on a specific subject or topic. And so most often, sometimes distinguished people can write very good perspectives. They're very short view on a perspective on a particular narrative. Well, like for instance, all of a sudden we talk about perovskites in the material science community. It's a very hot topic. Okay, so they know some people who are so good at it. The editor of Nature Review can invite a perspective on the current trend of perovskites. Is it viable? Is it not viable? So there sometimes, most often, it's just one page perspective, a view, very, very, very narrow. We can have a mini review. Mini reviews are also very, very short. They are longer than perspective. It simply means, again, that is very specific to something, to the subject, again, that you are writing. It's not very exhaustive. It's not a comprehensive review. It's specific. So you're looking at that mini review. Maybe you are picking out on scalability of perovskite solar cell, and you write a mini review on it. Or you just write a very mini review on hydrogen as a clean way of energy production. But then the review there is, you're going to put a lot of perspective in it. At the same time, a mini review of the scholar-like, the groundbreaking piece of work pieced together. You're not going to dive into too much of all the nitty-gritties that you do in a standalone, consistent, and systematic review. So I would say perspective is shorter than mini review. Mini review is shorter than a systematic review. But again, it depends. So every journal, when you go to Nature Review or any journal, they define what they mean by each of that. So we can have a perspective, we can have a mini review, we can have a comprehensive literature review. There are several things they call for. You want to check them and know whether you can even submit by yourself or you have to wait for them to invite you. So that's something you have to always watch out for. Yeah.
Yeah, Aisha, can you please unmute yourself and ask a question? Aisha.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Wema. Well done, sir. My question is on the issue of these knowledge gaps.
Yep.
So how can we identify the knowledge gaps? Is it based on the objective of the study or on the methodology of the study? Thank you.
Yeah, so it can be based on both of them. It can be methodological gap. Methodological simply means that the work has been done in a particular approach, and the techniques they use, maybe there is more updated versions of that technique. So you can then, and what a gap you're going to point out is what the old approaches could not be able to do, and vis-a-vis what the current approach can do. Those are the gaps. So this one cannot do it, that is the gap, and therefore you want to employ the new approaches which offer you the capacity to do that now. So that can be a gap as well. And depending on whether the first part of the question was whether it's methodology, or what was the first part again?
Whether it is based on objective of the study.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the objective is always going to guide you again on discovering those gaps. So as you read the paper, sometimes, and that's why reading even literature reviews on your subject is also very important. Most often, towards the conclusion of those papers, they put perspective and future work. As you read them, sometimes they themselves, some papers will even identify the gaps. They themselves will point out to you that these are the things that need further investigation, further attention, further view. So those will already start informing you again what are the gaps within the paper. And as you read it, the journals, you will see that, okay, they have managed to do this, but they didn't do this. And those are things, so you are reading, celebrating what they have been able to do, but you know beyond that, there's possibility to do this and do that, but they did not do it. So that's because you have already an objective, what you are trying to look to do, and you are finding out, has somebody done it already? And you figure out, oh no, they didn't do it, but they did something which can be the basis for what you want to do. So that can also help you find out the gaps here.
Thank you so much, sir. We have 3 hands after this. This will be the last 3 questions. So,
Okay.
Hello, thank you very much, sir, for these excellent presentations. And mine is, I just need like a guide.
Yeah.
I'm actually from Mariam Abacha American University, Nigeria and Niger Republic. One of the challenge is, for example, I'm doing a research in a very virgin area where some other continents have conducted some of this research, but in our own continent, or the scope or the area of the study here at the location is very difficult to get that. And there is also a lot of confusion of using different different words. And for example, health migration, other one would say seeking healthcare, whatever, talking about the same thing, but in a different way. Yeah. And when it comes to also the person who we are working with, he also have his own perspectives about how he wants you to go about it, giving you 1,000 materials, and that some of them may not be necessarily be related. So how can someone, what strategy do you think someone can do to minimize this confusion and be very focused on that, and get some high level of understanding between you and the person you are working together in that kind of scenario?
Yeah. Again, yeah, this conflicts are always going to be there, where you are dealing with people from different geographical location, cultural backgrounds, and everything, and the way they see things is different from the perspective you're always going to see things, and that's why there's always going to be dialogue and communications, and how you should approach this. And in everything we do, we are never a standalone. That's the first thing you have to know. Don't ever always try to work alone because of all these challenges. It's better to work with people and have disagreements and try to resolve the disagreements. Depending on your geographical location, if depending on the material or project or things that you're working on, as you said, whether in the idea part, they have looked at it from a different way, but from your region, that hasn't been looked at explicitly, that becomes a peculiar thing to geographical location. Sometimes we write literature review and we say solar energy production in Nigeria. That is specific to the Nigeria economy. We can do and say renewable energy expansion in Ghana. That is specific to Ghana. So the things that will be happening in Nigeria compared to Ghana are not exactly the same thing. They're going to be completely different things. So as you review that literature in the perspective, it's a narrow concept to Ghana. So everything you're going to say is going to be specific to that energy production in Ghana. And your goal is to be able to clearly define that and clearly know what you are going to talk about and convince whoever you are working with that is exactly what you are looking at. So we all have different problems and different needs and different regions and different. Sometimes we can even write a review based only on Africa. Right? Recently, I'm putting a review together. I call it Advancing High Performance Computing in Africa. That is to only Africa. I'm not talking about Europe. I'm not talking about the US. I'm not talking about Japan or China. That's only going to be things that relates to Africa. And my goal is to figure out how is high performance computing doing in Africa overall? Is there something I can figure out happening in Nigeria, in Cape Town, in Ghana, in Rwanda, that's the goal. That's what I'm doing. That's my goal, to dig out all those information and assemble them together. So depending on where you're coming from, the goal is always clear. Just be clear about what you want, what you are doing. And once you define the scope, you can always go for it, irrespective of this dichotomy of purview from different regions and different people. Just be clear what you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for that response. Sampiani, you can ask a question. Unmute yourself and ask a question.
Thank you very much. Good evening to all. And good. I want to also thank the presenter for this nice knowledge that he bring us this evening. And my concern is about the standalone review, literature review. So I would like to know from the study review, the standalone review. For instance, as I'm a PhD student, and I'm dealing also for the concern about the time, because most of the time is 3 years.
Yes.
And I have to stay in that period to not have any problem.
Yeah.
And is it possible to start maybe from the standalone literature review for the study literature review?
Yeah, so there are always several ways, and depending on the country in which you find yourself. So in the United States, students do what we call qualifying exams here, and they have to write a research proposal, what they're going to do, and a part of it is have a literature review. My students, when you work with me, because you're going to do that, I will always employ you. So my student, you come first year, yeah, you do coursework and everything, but you work on literature review already. It's going to be something we want to do on a specific. So we're going to publish it. And I won't say because it's time consuming, so you should not do it. It's the reason why you do it is because sometimes when PhD students come, they only do what their supervisor tells them to do. And I always say that that is not good for you, the student. It's always good for you to read more and come and have dialogue with your supervisor. So it becomes, because you need to take ownership of your project. You are the father, the mother of the project. The project is your baby. So you should know more even about the project than even your supervisor. You have to read and dig out information, come and have dialogue with your supervisor. And that helps you to always have trust. You develop that argument, not necessarily argumentative, but a very intellectual discussion already, right from day one, because you have read a lot about the literature. And students should always be in the habit of doing that. Don't just go to do a PhD and always, sometimes students come to defend their thesis and they say, my supervisor say I should do this. If you say that statement to me, it simply means that you did not think through your PhD. You just came and do what you're told to do. So it's a wrong way, and you never learn anything from that. So it's always good to figure out things yourself, discover them, go to your supervisor, discuss them. And the literature review is the only thing that will help you to do that. Where you find the gaps and find even how people interpret results, how people discuss the result. You learn all these languages, the choice of words, they help you in your own writing. So it's always a good thing. If you can do it, yes, I'd strongly recommend for people to always try to do that, because it just cannot be understated. So the time constraints are always going to be there, but these are all things you do. So you may tell yourself that maybe by the time I'm 1 year through, I want to publish a literature review. You may even publish a paper even before your literature review. It doesn't mean that your literature review should be the first paper from your PhD. You can already have even one paper, two papers from your own work, because each of those two work, you have already done some literature on them. Those literature can be added together, expanded into a mini or separate comprehensive review. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The last person, Abdullahi Sbal.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson. I'm highly euphoric that you made a distinction between systematic, mini, and perspective reviews. But my question is there like any requirement in terms of the minimum number each of these categories of review should meet?
Yeah, typically the ones that are going to be limited, so the perspective are limited, mini sometimes may be limited by the journal. Again, that's why you need to understand what a journal wants. Sometimes they will tell you maybe their mini review is a 3-page document. It's a 3-page paper. Their perspective is a 1-page paper. Some journal may say their perspective is 2-page. So those are things that you will need to read specific. If you are writing the review, you must have in mind which kind of journal are you targeting. And if you know the journal you are targeting, it's always good to read, go to their about journal and the different types of publications they do, manuscripts, standalone, all of that, they will list them there and their description. So they'll tell you what are the minimum the key requirements for them. They will tell you. And your goal is to make sure you synthesize that clearly and therefore follow it systematically. And that's the key thing I would say there. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
There is one hand. I think this will be the last one for today. Yeah. Augustine, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the presenter for that brilliant presentation. Mine is not a question per se, but I will say is a concern that I want to raise.
Yeah.
I checked such a training on Coursera on so many platforms weeks ago, and I couldn't get. And I believe only one section is not enough for we people to understand all the ins and outs with regard to a literature review.
Yeah.
So I want to know if there is if you, I mean, the presenter, you offer any
Mm-hmm.
long run training on literature review or scientific writing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's my concern.
that's a very important topic. Absolutely, that's becoming my heartbeat these days. I knew the challenge most students face and those technical challenges. So yeah, it's a good question. I don't want to jump ahead, but if you follow the Giants in Africa, you follow myself on LinkedIn, and I will encourage you to find me out. There are some good news in the pipeline coming out soon. This is something that I'm working on, and my heart is beating towards carefully on just coming together to offer more of these kinds of things, different things on scientific writing, statement of purpose, all kinds of things, grant writing, several things that we need to learn from each other and benefit from each other. So yeah, there's a couple of things brewing. It's pregnant. There's a lot of pregnant babies soon. Very soon, babies will be coming out. Just be on the watch out, and the announcements will follow through. And we can assemble maybe sometime once in a month. We can make it more regular and just have good time together. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I will be looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Please, if you have questions, please type it in the chat box. Let us wrap up this.
So I'm gonna wrap up now. It's sometimes when the food is getting so sweet, you don't want to end it, but we have to end it. So I will try to wrap up. I see maybe people have different things to do, and the day is already far gone in some places. So I will summarize up. These slides are going to come to you guys anyway. You can keep it as reference and reach out to me anytime you have all my contact details on it. So you should be fine. So we talk about those three categorization: your abstract, a body, and conclusion. Very important. If it's a standalone review, yes, I told you that you need an abstract. If it's not a standalone review and it's just integrated, you don't need an abstract for that. So that's the key thing you need to look out for when you write a standalone reviews. There was one example I said I was going to show. So if you look at this paper published in ACS Energy Letter, they look at solar energy production, recent advances, challenges, and future perspectives. Already when you read this paper, you should look at the person is going to talk about advances, the challenges, and even point out some of the gaps, the perspective, things that needs to be done in the future. So if you look at their abstract, it's key. They will begin and introduce very, very decently the overall goal, but they will tell you what exactly they did. Look at it. They say this one say in this focus review. So if you look at it, it's not just a general review. That's the key word there. It's a focus review. They are going to be very specific to something that they want to address. So in this focus review, we present or provide a comprehensive review of these technologies. So the technologies that are leading to hydrogen production. So that's an abstract of a standalone review. This is a standalone review that somebody has published on solar hydrogen production. But they have a standalone, and they will have an introduction where they can introduce the broader perspective. I strongly recommend, especially for young researchers and upcoming researchers and students, always find some decent reviews that have been, especially when I look at the current. So sometimes I look at literature review and just say 2022. I want to see what is the latest, because that latest one will give birth to all the older ones most often. So it's always good, read this thing, look out for, just synthesize them. They help you to produce your own. Yeah. There's always a saying that everything you're looking for, somebody may have done it in another version. Your goal is just to adapt it and learn from it and personalize it, own it, and do it for your own. So it's very important that we take note of those. So your abstracts generally, if it's going to be a standalone review, that's what you would do. You will need it for a standalone review, but if not, that's not there. So like I just read that one for you already. This is a separate one. Again, they will talk about, always they start with the general information, the background. The next thing will be the specific of what they did. And the next thing will be, what are the main findings? Always, the abstract must have those three things. Start broad, background. Next, specific, what you have done. What kind of literature review is it that you're even doing? Is it a mini? Is it a focus? Is it, what exactly are you going to be pointing out? You can specifically talk about it. So if you look at this here, what exactly they say, this review examines the use of multidisciplinary approach to diagnosis of these and the primary physician, blah, 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 etc. The last part talks about what did they find when summarizing their overall finding in the abstract. So the abstract only relevant when you're writing a standalone review. And for you to do that well, it's good as you read different ones, they will guide you as well. It's always very good to have. I always say too, when you have a lot of fish in the soup, it does not spoil the soup. So just read, broaden your understanding, read other people, see how they are writing their own, adapt styles. Sometimes maybe the style I like is not what Fumi like, but sometimes something will resonate with us because that's our personality. We just have to read and find out the best view of things. So that is typically an abstract, and that will go for standalone. But introduction, yes, it will cover whether you do a standalone review or not. If it's part of an article you're writing scientific, then your introduction will be there, but the literature will be embedded within your introduction. That's basically how most of these things work. So most often your introduction, you start very broad and include all the relevant backgrounds. But then as you move down, you need to provide information that is relevant to the specific topic that is of interest to you. Tell your reader what is the scope of your review. Always, this is what you define. You tell the scope, how far you want to go. Yeah. So that is where you want to point out the limitation and where you are actually going to be focusing on in that literature. And tell your reader what is the aim and the purpose of the review. And that's going to be often towards the ending of your conclusion. What really do you want to achieve as you write out this literature review? So your introductions are generally very, very broad, very broad. We talk about, so we started talking about CO2. These comments, I'm going to leave them for you guys on the slide. You want to read them. They are just examples for you to adapt. But if you look at the broader way by which this person started this statement, he said the concentration of carbon dioxide has been increasing throughout the history. That's a broader statement. Then now he's going to justify that statement. It was steady maybe at this until the Industrial Revolution. So it's beginning to connect dots, and he will soon begin to expatiate that. So that is an introduction, broader perspective to the literature, what we know and what has been happening. And those are key things. And I put the comments there that you can read and know why the sentence is equally there as well. So introductions are generally going to be very, very broad. And as you narrow them down, you want to get more specific to the key points where you want to. So this part like this, the sentence provide key information that is relevant to the specific topic. So you started very broad, but now the person wants to narrow it down to what exactly they want to tackle. And if that's where they put that sentence there. And then the next sentence is going to provide the aim. What are they doing? So he pointed out some things and said, therefore, this review aims to directly assess how global wheat crop will react to rise in environmental CO2 and guide research of mitigation of any of these challenges we may face. So always is good. Your introduction, somehow you must always state what do you aim to achieve in the review, even if it's a standalone review. Yeah, you got to make sure that's clearly stated, clearly stated. Without a scope defined, without an aim defined, the literature will lose perspective and lose focus. Yeah. So that's the introduction, but then you come to the body. The body is now where you collect all the evidence of literature that you're putting assembly together. That's the body. So the body is a review. It contains your review of the literature relevant to your topic. You should structure this. And that's why I say you either be logical, coherent, use subheadings, subtopics to create those distinctions. So if you look at this one in ACS Energy Letter, they have the introduction. So this is the introduction session. But then as you come down, they talk about approaches to solar hydrogen production. So this is a subtopic. So one of the approaches is through water splitting. So they're going to focus here on water splitting. What is it? What have people been doing in regard to water splitting? Then you come down, you come to this one, PEC water splitting. So these are different. This is PC, that's photovoltaic. So they talk about all the different approaches. They come here, PV, EC, water splitting. That means there are different ways by which they can split the water. So, but they don't want to just throw all of them out there. They're creating subtopics, subheading. That helps them to concentrate the literature they have even searched into several categories. But there's only going to be cross linkages between them as they move through the write-up overall. So those are things that we need to watch out for. Subheadings are very important, and they help you to condense and focus your specific area of the search within a specific subtopic. Yeah. Again, that is a sample body. So basically here is going to be talking about what people have done. So that's based on a CO2 project. So if you look at this paragraph, you say multiple studies have found evidence supporting an increase in crop growth in environments of elevated CO2. So for instance, India search, he is now going to point out what the individuals have done and synthesize them together, supporting evidences, all the literature, the summary, condensing and synthesizing what the different bodies are putting together. So that's the key thing that you need to do in your body. And that can follow up more references, more literature, depending on how extensive you're doing. Your body is always going to be a collection of evidence to support the arguments you're making or supports the topic you are exploring. Yeah. And you can conclude. So the conclusion, basically, you are demonstrating how you have addressed the questions you have raised, your aim you have stated in your abstract that you want to achieve, tell your audience that you've achieved it. If there are some future perspective or research that is applicable, that's why you are broader. You want to bring in yourself into it and suggest that even when you do the literature review, you saw some gaps and you can point them out why they are worth in further investigation. Whether you do it yourself or somebody else can pick it and do it. Yeah. So the conclusion will always start with specific, but you want to go through and several conventions can be adopted. But the goal always is find out the key highlights and do what you've done. Sometimes in your conclusion, don't bring in new information you have not yet talked about. Yeah, it's not the time to start raising again a new literature. It's just basically summarizing and condensing, putting your perspective into the work. So again, I've put here an example that you can read that tries to conclude the work, try to summarize the work, and the reason why they summarize is the way they do. But the goal again is to read other people's other mini reviews, other perspective, other comprehensive review, see how the various segments and different journals will have different approaches. Psychology will do it differently. Material science will do it. Everybody will do it differently. You want to make sure that whichever discipline you abreast yourself with it and get understanding of all those things very carefully. Yeah. So several other forms of the conclusions are there. I will leave them to you guys to explore as and when you receive the slide. And the comments are already there. So that's what exactly I would say. So there are different languages, and this is the last two slides, I think. You can use to express. Typically, we use reporting verbs when we are writing literature reviews. So if you talk about aims, you say that we aim to investigate, examine, or look at. When you talk about results, you say so and so have shown that, or suggested that, or revealed that. Those are the verbs you want to be using. Opinions, or your opinion is a state that, or we believe that, or it argues that. Those are your opinions. So those are verbs that typically we use in literature review. And again, you want to be abreast with them that when you're talking about aim, result, and opinion, you know what kind of words or verbs you should be using. Yeah, you can use evaluative languages and cautious languages. If you're talking about something that's very positive, about something you say, oh, this is an effective approach. It's a necessary thing, significant, or it's crucial. If it's negative, you say, there is some question, or so have done this, but it is still unclear, or the results in the literature is still inconclusive or insignificant. Again, you are being negative, but you are doing it very cautiously, and it's questionable. So those are specific languages or words sometimes you will find in literature reviews when people do them, and you also want to adapt them and know when to use them in your literature review. So you can use sometimes what we call boosters when you want to express a booster in terms of a doubt, or something we call hedges. Hedges are expression of caution. You want to be, you are not sure, so you better don't be too overcommitted. So you say, oh, it appears that, or it seems, possibly, it's likely, or somewhat, or it suggests. Those are things that you are kind of, they're called hedges, where you are being cautious in the way you do the literature review, even though you want to criticize or you want to say, this seems to suggest that, it means that maybe you are not quite sure of why they do that. But if you are very, very sure, you're positive about it, a booster, you want to evaluate, you say, yeah, it clearly shows this, there's definitely this, without doubt, there is certainty, without agreement, it's unquestionable, it's a well-established fact. You use those kind of words to boost them. Yeah, if it's hedges, you want to be cautious how you use the framework to do those keywords. So these are just additional comments I just wanted to add to you guys to think about and figure out some of these words for yourself. So this way I just want to summarize and say that we've gone through a lot today. It's been exhaustive, it's been extensive, it's a lot of information. You will need time to dissect them, to synthesize them, to process them. But if we try to summarize it in the whole thing we just look at now, we're taking about literature review. The key thing we saw, the pink region there, is choosing and refining your topic. Choosing and refine the topic. You choose, refine, choose, refine. It's not a linear process. And as you refine and find out the key words, the things that are matter, not too broad, not too vague, you begin to search your literature. Do a proper, diligent literature search, find the key words to find, select, do the proper reading and select the things that you want to include in your table, and then begin to analyze and synthesize. Don't just analyze, synthesize, connect the dots, contradictions, find all of them, and then develop your own arguments. Put your perspective into it based on what you have found. And if you do those things very, very diligently, you see that this process always goes. I always talk about identify, categorize, evaluate, and determine. So each of them they just link themselves up somehow, and your goal is to figure out. And those are all the things we've gone through today. It doesn't end here. This is just the beginning. So as somebody said already, let's be on the lookout for things that will come in the pipeline. I have a lot of things that I'm still looking forward and putting together to help in any capacity. So yes, those things will be communicated most often in my LinkedIn profile and sometimes in my personal website. So you could keep an eye on that, follow the activities that are going on, and reach out anytime you have specific questions you want to send and need some help with anything that is in terms of download this paper for me. If I can't do it, I'll forward it to one of my PhD students. They'll figure it out and send it to you. So we all need to support each other. Those in the diaspora, if you know somebody who is reaching out from an area where they don't have it, be helpful to them. Let's be kind to each other. Let's support each other, and let's keep growing. So with that, that is where I want to end the presentation for today. It's been long, extensive, exhausting, but I hope it's worth the time. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm very sure we've learned a lot and we're ready to put it into use. So yesterday I created a Google group. So that is for our conversation. So if you have any question, this is a continued learning process. If you have any question, you can just go to Google Apps. There's something called groups. Look for Genius in Africa Literature Review group. Then you can ask your questions, send in your questions, make sure we are like connected, and we can keep the conversation going. If you need to download any paper, you can just drop it on the what's it called? You can drop the DOI of the paper, and anyone that is available can just help you like download and send it to you. So it's a better way to keep our conversations intact and help one another. And also, I would like to take a comment from Dr. Ketevi. I don't know if he's available to give a comment.
And if there's any general final comments from anyone,
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ketevi, for supporting us. Like, I don't take this for granted. Thank you so much.
No, I follow most of the presentation, and I think it's really brilliant. Nelson, thank you very much for this. I don't really have any comments except to say that I agree with all of the recommendations and the suggestions and the instructions that Nelson has given in this presentation. So I think, Nelson, we'll have to invite you to the African School of Physics at some point so that we can talk to many other students as well. Thank you very much.
I look forward to that. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, Mustafa, you have a question. We are going to take a picture, but I just want to say these things. Please, you can follow us on social media. We have Instagram page, we have Facebook page. Please, I'll drop the link. I'll send a mail after this as well. Follow us to keep updated about our programs. We still have a lot that is coming on, and Dr. Nelson is with us, so we can actually do can do a video, short videos, and we can put it on our YouTube page so that you can follow and get updated. So we are going to have a post quiz because we are issuing a certificate. So there's going to be a post quiz. I'm just going to add some questions to the quiz based on what we have learned, and I'm going to send the mail immediately after the meeting. So the post quiz is just because we have to measure our knowledge. We have to measure that, okay, during the application, we put in some questions, we got some replies. I want to be able to measure if you have actually learned something from this video. So we have a post quiz. I'm going to send the link to the quiz, and then we are going to issue a certificate for this lecture, and then follow us follow the YouTube. The recording of this meeting will be posted on YouTube. Please follow the channel, and also the Google group is very important. If you have any question, you can drop it on the Google group. That is where everybody will be seeing your question, and anyone is free to respond to the question. So the Google group is very important. The lecture slides also will be shared with us through the email, or I can set up a Google Drive. Then we can drop important documents and we can share it with everyone. Please don't hoard information, share it with everyone, because you don't know who needs it. Just keep sharing, keep sharing, keep sharing. You don't know how you're going to help someone. And Mustafa, okay, you can unmute yourself now and ask your question. Mustafa. Hello. Okay, then I'm going to unmute someone. I would have to search Godson.
So Mustafa said he cannot unmute himself.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Doc, I wanted to find out something. I was actually following the lectures while I was still on a conference because I couldn't see it. It's very, very important. So I was just watching you speaking, and I didn't know whether maybe you said something I want to ask, but let me be clear. Please, I want you to explain to me what a review paper is, maybe in a layman's term. That's one. Then number two, sometimes you find yourself in a situation whereby your lecturer or your supervisor have done the research for you, and then maybe he has a topic and he maybe is guiding you. I want to ask, is it possible that you actually set up your objectives before you actually doing your literature review? Because when you do a lot of literature review, you find out that the part which your supervisor is taking is not the same part that literature is saying. Sometimes we have this conflict. So you have to now redefine your objectives over and over again, so you can be able to meet up the gap. I want to know, when you do your literature review and you hypothesize, then you have to set up your objective to meet your hypothesis and prove whether they are correct. What do you do in situation whereby your supervisor is giving you a part? Maybe you already have a nice proposal and you find yourself in a situation whereby this thing is not actually what is obtainable in literature. So just like that, do you fight your supervisor? Do you argue with him?
No, don't fight anyone.
So how do you come in to see how you can correlate these two? It's very, very important, please, because I find myself in that situation. After doing thorough literature review, and I begin to realize that my objectives and what we actually discuss is not actually correlating. So now the challenge is, how do I go to present it to him and be able to refine or redefine? Am I going to change everything or change the topic again? You know, I don't know how to approach it. Thank you.
Okay, so you were asking initially what is a review paper. So if you talk about review paper, do you mean a standalone review publication? Or just a review paper for a coursework? What do you mean? Is it for a coursework, or you want to publish that? Or you mean a publication from a review paper?
Okay.
Okay. What I mean, a review paper, we are supposed to do our literature review and we are asked to extract maybe 2 papers from it. So supervisor say, okay, you have a review paper from this work you're going to do.
So he wants you to publish the work when you do
yes, he wants the work to be published. Yeah.
So that's what we were looking. That's going to be a standalone review paper.
Okay, standalone review paper. Yeah.
It's going to be a standalone. It's going to be a standalone review paper. So the comments I've said regarding standalone review paper will still hold. Yeah. And typically standalone review papers are more exhaustive than maybe just an article-based review. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. I get it. I understand what a standalone is now. I just want to find in which category it belongs. I think I'm okay. Thank you very much.
So with regards to whether you fight a supervisor or not fight a supervisor, I never encourage anybody to fight a supervisor. The next thing will be that, sure, every PhD student, when you start working with any supervisor, most often either we have a grant and we hired you to come and do what we have set out to achieve. Most grants are written by the professor themselves. So the professor already has written a proposal, and that's what he needs to prove to the funder that he's going to do. So if I say I ask for maybe money from Department of Energy, and I say I'm going to unravel the intricate interface chemistry in perovskite material, at the end of the day, that's what they want to see. So when I hired a student on the project, that's exactly what a student is going to do. Maybe I can dissect that project and divide it into several students, and they will look at different aspects of perovskite. So the key thing is the professor will always have a certain objective based on the proposal he's written. So if you go and join a professor's group and you're working for them and they tell you to work on a particular project, sometimes it's also very good to really be broad with the professor and have these clear-cut understanding from day one as you start to discuss the project. He hired you. So, Prof, what am I going to be working on? Okay, why are we working on that? So he will explain those backgrounds to you, or was this part of it? He will tell you, oh, we had this grant and this is what we set out to do. He can give you the breakdown and the background. Sometimes you can even have access to the proposal if you have very good relationship with the proposer. Sometimes maybe because he's still a student, confidentiality document. But I don't think if you have a good relationship with your supervisor, some of this has become natural, the flow. So the key thing is developing that rapport right from day one, from the beginning. And it should be conversation. It should be dialogue you have with your supervisor. He becomes, if it's a man, he becomes your senior brother. And if it's a woman, it becomes like your bigger sister. So that you just talk about things, not only in the office. Sometimes maybe you go to his house or you guys meet somewhere, talk casual. So Prof, okay, so you said we're looking at this objective. Where really are we even looking at this? That's from the casual, maybe even in a park somewhere. And then he will start talking and start talking and start talking. And then you pick a why. What is his heart? What is the heartbeat? Why did he even set out to get his grant in the first place? So that's what I encourage students to do from the beginning stages of your PhD. Don't just go and just accept it without asking questions. So the part where you ask questions is when you're developing the relationship with the supervisor. Ask them questions. Oh, Prof, so this project you're going to do, why really are we even doing it? Like, because he has a reason why he applied for the grant. He will tell you his heartbeat. So you want to know those things. Be curious. That is every attribute of every good scientist. Curiosity. Sometimes they say it kills a cat, but I don't hope it kills you. Yeah. So that don't fight, but figure out these things right from the beginning, and it helps you have a clear definition of why you're going to spend 4 years with this person, or why you're going to spend 5 years with this person, or 3 years with this person. Is it going to help you achieve that? Are you going to be able to do it? You want to know that right from the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for that. I also want to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Abdulhakim Bello.
Oh, yeah, yes.
He's my supervisor for my master's projects. Thank you for coming, sir. I really appreciate. Mustafa, you can ask your question.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey,
thank you, Genius in Africa, for organizing this wonderful section for young researchers in Africa and other continents in the world. And thank you once again for connecting me with my encourageous lecturer, who is also trying to support young academic, young scholars, and young researchers, a person that is always looking forward assisting people. So my question here is that in some journals, in the abstract, you will see that they are giving the abstract some headings. We need more information about it. Like sometimes you see introduction in the abstract, you see aim, you see conclusion, and you see methodology in the abstract, like it is being given a subheadings.
Yeah.
And again, writing the abstract, it varies. Some they say your abstract should not be more than 250 words, 350 words. And also, sir, help us to give us an information on what we should focus to include in the abstract and how we can derive the keywords from the abstract. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Hey, Mustafa, good to hear from you. Yeah, abstract is very important. And as we said, the key thing is that, yeah, he said that, yeah, sometimes in your abstract, you will see, again, the method that is being used, some part of a broader introduction in the abstract, and like some key findings in the abstracts. Sometimes even some a little bit of perspective in the abstract. And abstracts are very, very limited. Most often it's 200 words, it's 250 words. Every journal will vary, and you got to make sure you adhere to the rules and requirements. But the key thing, as we said already, so your abstracts typically, as we said, it's a very specific summary of what you are actually intending to do. So if I showed you that example that I was showing in the, let me see what I can share that screen again. If we go back to these guys who summarize this work here, it's an abstract they're putting together. This part here, from here to here, it's basically a broad introduction of the background to this topic, solar-driven hydrogen production. So again, that statement there can still be part of an introduction as well. So you see, but basically what they're doing there is, it's a very succinct and clear thing they want to do there. They're just pointing out why hydrogen production, why? It's just like, you want to do it. So if we talk about For instance, somebody is doing review on arsenic contamination. His abstract, he can begin by saying, arsenic in water bodies causes severe harm to the human body. He wakes people up. So your first line in the abstract is always to wake people up. Like, hey, wake up. I'm about to tell you something important. So that is what the key thing does. So they begin by saying solar hydrogen is considered a potentially promising way to utilize solar energy to tackle climate change, blah, 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 blah. That statement, the first sentence, is to resonate with people who might be interested in global energy, climate change, hydrogen production. So that is, it can still be part of an introduction. He went on to tell what exactly they're about to do. So he said he provided a comprehensive review, etc. So now he's breaking down what exactly they do. And I think you see that he concludes by saying what exactly they're putting there. Other reviews will be different. So sometimes a person will say in an abstract, in this review, we are going to review all the methodologies used in the synthesis of carbon-based nanoparticles. He can mention some of those techniques in the literature. Or say in this review, we exhaust a comprehensive synthetic approaches to this, and he mentions some of them. So those are methodology again, but within the abstract, he wants to focus exactly what they are going to talk about in the further follow-up discussions. So you abstract, the key thing is highlight the key thing. Sometimes is a key finding that will come in the abstract as well. Among all the things you have done, what is the thread line? What is the golden thread? You want to state it again clearly within the abstract. So the key way to do it is read a bit more of different, but abstract will have only one heading. It's just going to be abstract. I heard you saying that they will have different subheadings. Abstract never have different subheading. It's just one heading, abstract, and then they write everything under it. If it's 250 words, 200 words, they write everything together. They don't break abstract down to introduction or methodology. No, they don't do that in abstract. Abstract is just abstract, and it's 200 words, 250 words. Yeah. So that's the bottom line is, yeah, it will vary, but the key thing is explore. If you are aiming at a particular journal, read a couple of their abstracts and see a guiding principle for yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. We'll be ending the meeting now with a picture. Yeah. So can you please turn on your videos? Yeah.